So check out this creature. What do you think this thing is? Is it a plant, an animal, or maybe even some kind of wild fungus? At first glance, this fossil could pass for any of those ancient life forms. And honestly, scientists have been scratching their heads over it for over 150 years. But now, it looks like we might finally be cracking the case on this unknown species discovery. A long time ago, during the Devonian period, plants were just starting to grow on land. The tallest trees were only a few feet high, and animals hadn't even evolved backbones yet. Back then, massive natural towers up to 26 feet tall and 3 feet wide, looking like branchless cylindrical tree trunks, were rising from the ground. Hey, what a contrast with trees back then. When scientists first discovered fossils of those towering organisms, they were totally confused, as these strange prehistoric creatures didn't look like anything they'd seen before. Some thought they were weird cone-bearing trees. Others guessed they might be underwater plants like giant seaweed or lichens, which are partnerships between fungi and algae. The mysterious objects received a name, Prototaxities. When scientists studied them up close, their internal structure reminded them of a bunch of different things. They couldn't believe a 20-foot-tall fungus or algae could be real, but that's what the fossils showed. Then most scientists decided that Prototaxities were giant fungi. But still, something didn't feel right about it. In 2007, they decided to finally get the Prototaxities mystery explained and ran a chemical test on the fossils. So they looked at the types of carbon inside them and compared them to regular plants from the same time. If Prototaxities were plants, the carbon ratios would match, but they didn't. That means Prototaxities weren't plants, and they receive carbon in a different way, not by photosynthesis, but probably more like fungi do. But then again, they look nothing like the mushrooms we know and love today. Prototaxities were giant, likely the largest living things on land at their time. And even if these strange prehistoric creatures were some fungi of their sort, then it's weird they don't have any living relatives today that would resemble them. So, if we put all this together, it looks like Prototaxities are an entirely different and previously unknown life form that didn't leave any offspring. Now, Prototaxities aren't the only unclassified organisms on Earth. About 600 million years ago, there were no fish, no sharks, no crabs. Just simple life forms like algae and bacteria drifting through calm, shallow seas. But some seriously strange creatures, completely unlike anything we see today, lived among them. They looked like underwater ferns, stood perfectly still, and absorbed nutrients straight from the water. These bizarre life forms were rangeomorphs. They ruled the oceans that were thick with nutrients back then. So rangeomorphs didn't need mouths, eyes, or muscles to survive and just soaked up whatever they needed. Some of them were as small as a finger, and others grew as tall as 6.5 feet. But as Earth entered the Cambrian period, the oceans became much more competitive. Fast-swimming creatures with limbs, eyes, and jaws showed up and ate the same food faster, and maybe even ate the rangeomorphs themselves. The chemistry of the oceans also started to shift, and the nutrient-rich waters became more like today's oceans, where food floats around in particles that active animals scoop up. So the rangeomorphs vanished forever, but scientists still find their fossils all over the world, preserved in ancient rock. They had an incredible fractal design, a pattern that repeated itself at every level, from the smallest branches to the full body. Using fossil clues, researchers built 3D computer models of what rangeomorphs looked like. They found out that these strange prehistoric creatures filled their space in a nearly perfect way. They were like optimized living sponges. But scientists still can't agree on where exactly rangeomorphs fit on the tree of life. At first, they argued over whether they were plants, animals, fungi, or something completely different. Now, most agree they were primitive animals, though they were so different that they might deserve their own unique branch, what scientists call a clade. And then there was Dickinsonia, another prehistoric creature that was so strange that scientists couldn't even agree on what it was for nearly 100 years. Some thought it was a giant single-celled amoeba. Others thought it was a type of lichen, or maybe a failed evolutionary experiment. This bizarre life form lived about 558 million years ago, long before dinosaurs, sharks, or even insects showed up. After many years of studies, Australian researchers finally got proof that Dickinsonia was an animal, and possibly the oldest one scientists have ever found. They solved the mystery thanks to really well-preserved fossil fat molecules stuck in the rock near the White Sea. These molecules were a type of cholesterol, the kind of fat found in animal cells. If cholesterol is present, it almost certainly came from an animal, sort of like animal DNA. Dickinsonia lived millions of years earlier than scientists had previously thought, and didn't look anything like modern animals. It had no head, no mouth, no arms, no legs, and definitely no organs. It was oval-shaped, like a giant pill bug or flattened jelly bean, with weird ridges running across its body. Some were tiny, but others grew up to 5 feet long, the size of a person. It didn't swim or walk, but was just lying on the seafloor, soaking up nutrients from the water or absorbing stuff through its skin. It was tricky to identify because most fossils came from high-pressure rock, where heat had destroyed all the delicate organic stuff scientists needed to study. To get to the good fossils, researchers had to rappel down 300-foot cliffs, dig out huge blocks of sandstone, throw them down, wash them, and then repeat the process. And inside one of those sandstone slabs was the fossil that changed everything. That helped finally confirm that Dickinsonia was an animal, which proves that complex animal life existed before the Cambrian diversification, where tons of new animals with bones, eyes, and limbs suddenly appeared. Scientists think the spot where they found these fossils might hold more clues about ancient life. For a long time, scientists had no clue what other group of ancient life forms, slime molds, were. These weird jelly-like blobs that pulse and ooze on rotten logs and forest floors aren't fungi like mushrooms, though people thought they were for years. It turns out they're more like amoebas, squishy, single-celled organisms that can move around. There are over 900 species of slime molds all over the world. You'll find them in soil, leaf litter, and especially on decaying wood. Scientists found them trapped in amber from 100 million years ago, and it looks just like modern slime molds. Scientists still know very little about how slime molds interact with other species, what role they play in ecosystems, or how they think without a brain, nerves, or a control center. But somehow, they can make decisions and adapt to their surroundings. It makes them a lot like social insects, like ants or bees, where no single bug is in charge, but the colony still works together as a smart group. Even without brains, scientists have trained slime molds to solve mazes just by responding to chemicals and learning from their environment. One way these organisms learn is through a process called habituation. It's sort of like how you get used to cold water after jumping in a lake, or stop noticing an annoying buzzing noise after a few minutes. That's your brain helping you tune out something harmless. Some slime molds can do this too. If they get in nasty conditions, like salty, dry, acidic environments or chemicals, they'll avoid them at first. But if there's food on the other side, they'll eventually get used to it and push their way through. And if you let slime mold go dormant and wake up a year later, it still remembers how to deal with salt. They even seem to be able to decide where to go based on where they found food in the past. With more and more unknown species discoveries, scientists can paint a better picture of Earth's biological past.
It's official. Official. A day will no longer last 24 hours. Earth's now spinning faster, literally, and our days are going to get shorter. At the moment, it's believed that the shortest day happened on July 10th, 2025. It was shorter not by much, just a fraction of a second, 1.36 milliseconds according to most sources, but still. And all because of the moon's position messing with Earth's rotation, just enough to speed things up. If it turns out to be not a one-time thing and Earth keeps spinning faster, it could be the start of a big mess. All our time stuff like GPS, the internet, atomic clocks, even how countries keep time, depends on the day being 24 hours. But if the planet speeds up, those systems could totally freak out. clocks would get all out of whack, and anything that needs perfect timing could go sideways. We're talking about more than just a few lost seconds. This could shake up everything. Flights, money transfers, basically how we live day to day. We'll have to rethink how we measure time. Are you ready for that kind of chaos? Now, normally a day is 24 hours, or 86,400 seconds, because that's how long it takes for the planet to do a full spin. But Earth's rotation isn't always stable. A bunch of things influence it, like where the sun and the moon are, or how the planet's mass is balanced. Earth is like a giant spinning top, and anything can throw it off rhythm. But our planet has been slowing down for a long, really long time. Because according to scientists, about 1 to 2 billion years ago, a day only lasted 19 hours. Not because the planet was lazy or anything. Nope, it was the moon's fault. It was way closer to us back then. Its gravity had a stronger pull, and that made Earth spin faster. And that faster spin meant shorter days. The thing is, the moon is slowly drifting away from Earth, and as it does, Earth's rotation slows down, and our days get longer over time. But during that billion-year window, something weird happened. The moon kinda just hovered at a certain distance. It wasn't moving out, it wasn't pulling harder. It was like it paused. And that pause locked us into 19-hour days for what scientists are now calling a boring billion. It was a time when pretty much everything on Earth slowed down. Tectonic activity was stable, the climate wasn't doing anything weird, and even life kind of plateaued. Now, let's get into the sciencey part. The moon's gravity controls our ocean tides. That's what slows down Earth's spin. But the sun pulls on Earth too, just in a different way. When sunlight hits Earth's surface and heats it up, that creates what's called solar atmospheric tides, and those can actually speed up Earth's rotation. Right now, the moon's gravitational tides are about twice as strong as the sun's atmospheric tides, which means the moon is in charge when it comes to Earth's spin. But back in the boring billion, the sun and moon were basically in a tug-of-war with equal strength. This phenomenon is called tidal resonance. It's like Earth hit a cosmic pause button. If the moon hadn't backed off, we might still be living in a 19-hour day world right now. These days, the moon is still drifting away from us, and because of that, our days are slowly getting longer. Until lately, things have gotten weird. In the last few years, scientists noticed that Earth hasn't been sticking to schedule. In fact, it's been spinning faster, and I mean record-breaking fast. Back in 2020, Earth started picking up the pace more than it had since scientists started clocking it in the 70s. Then came July 5th, 2024, the shortest day ever recorded. We lost 1.66 milliseconds. Not a big deal if you're just watching videos on YouTube, but on a planetary scale, it's kinda huge. Now, we get back to July 10th, 2025. On that date, the moon was sitting way up near the poles, very far from Earth's equator. And that changed the game. When the moon is hanging out closer to the poles, it messes with Earth's rotation and makes our days a little bit shorter. That kind of change isn't unusual. Earth's spin has always had some ups and downs. But today, the moon isn't the only factor. According to NASA, human activity is changing how Earth spins too. Between 2000 and 2018, moving ice and pumping groundwater around the planet shifted enough mass that it added 1.33 milliseconds to our days per century. Natural disasters can mess things up too. Remember the massive earthquake that hit Japan in 2011? It actually shortened Earth's day by 1.8 microseconds. Just one quake, one microjolt to the planet's schedule, but the consequences were catastrophic. On March 11, 2011, at exactly 2:46 p.m. local time, a huge earthquake hit off Japan's east coast. We're talking magnitude 9, one of the biggest quakes ever recorded. The epicenter was about 80 miles from Sendai and over 230 miles from Tokyo. Japan's main island shifted 8 feet. Yes, the ground moved and whole cities literally slid. But it didn't just shake buildings and trigger a tsunami. The quake was so strong it redistributed Earth's mass, like shifting weights around on a spinning top. When you do that, the top spins differently. Same deal with Earth. The movement of tectonic plates was enough to tweak the whole planet's rotation. The thing is, the earthquake moved land and shifted Earth's figure axis. That's the axis our planet's mass balances around, by 6.5 inches. That's separate from the north-south spin axis, which we rotate on daily at about 1,000 miles per hour. But still, that shift was enough to make Earth wobble differently as it was spinning. It didn't tilt the entire axis in space. Only stuff like the sun or moon's gravity can do that. But it was still a major shakeup, no pun intended. And it wasn't the first time this had happened. The 2004 Sumatra quake, a staggering magnitude 9.1, sped up Earth's spin and cut 6.8 microseconds off the day. Chile's 2010 quake took off another 1.26 microseconds. Every time one of these mega quakes hit, it's like Earth gets a tiny jolt, spinning just a hair faster. And it might not be over. For example, that March 11 quake unleashed more than 80 aftershocks that were magnitude 6.0 or higher. Long after, some of those aftershocks were still tweaking the day length. It was very subtle, changes in millionths of a second, but real. But the thing is, even the seasons can mess with how fast Earth spins. A geophysicist from the University of Liverpool has explained it like this. There's way more land in the northern hemisphere than in the south. So, during northern summer, trees grow leaves, and that leaf mass moves upward, farther from Earth's center. And it sounds pretty harmless, right? But no, that tiny shift actually slows down our planet's spin, just a bit. Think about a figure skater arms in. They spin faster. Arms out, they slow down. Same with Earth. When its mass shifts away from the core, it rotates more slowly. So yeah, in the summer, Earth literally chills a bit, spin-wise. Now you don't panic about your day suddenly feeling longer yet. Your clock is still gonna say 24 hours. That's just how our timekeeping works. As for these differences, they're milliseconds. You'd never feel it. But the problem is that over time, it all adds up. If the planet ever spun slow enough that we were off by more than 0.9 seconds, then we'd have to do something. That's when the International Earth Rotation and Reference System Service steps in. These are the people who keep tabs on Earth's spin, and if things drift too far out of sync with our clocks, they throw in a leap second to fix it. Yep, they literally add a second to the clock every now and then to keep Earth time on track. It's like the universe's version of a software update. In any case, with the moon slowly drifting away and Earth calming down, the fact that our planet is suddenly picking up speed, even just a little, makes experts and ordinary people raise their eyebrows. It's a reminder that even something as basic as a day isn't set in stone. The planet's moving quicker. Time is literally slipping. Something's shifting. Some places don't look important until the world realizes they hold the keys to the future. That's the case with Canada's Arctic. For most of history, it was just ice, snow, rocks, caribou, and even more ice. But now, it's about to become one of the most important places on Earth, and maybe make Canada a global superpower. Why? Because it's hiding minerals that power electric vehicles, satellites, and missile systems, while the demand is skyrocketing. However, it's not just mining and having resources. It's also about control. Right now, China has a massive head start because it refines over 90% of the world's rare earths. That means if you want to launch a satellite, manufacture advanced electronics, or even just keep the lights on in your fancy smart home, odds are you're relying on China. And that makes a lot of world powers very nervous. Because when everything's going electric, the last thing you need is being dependent on your geopolitical rival. So now, the global clean tech treasure hunt is officially on. The US, Europe, Japan, Australia, they're all competing. However, the latest technology and untapped potential might give Canada the upper hand. Canada's had these minerals for decades. But with low prices, tough terrain, and no global rush, they mostly stayed untouched. However, Ottawa is finally stepping up its game. Back in 2022, Canada rolled out the Critical Minerals Strategy with billions in funding and tax perks to get companies digging. There's also plans to build the necessary roads, ports, and power lines to tap into those remote deposits up north. Canada already produces more than 60 minerals and metals, but 31 of them are now considered critical. 6 of those are having VIP treatment: lithium, graphite, nickel, cobalt, copper, and rare earth elements. But digging it up is just step 1. The real plan? Keep it local. Melt that frozen treasure into shiny new batteries right at home. That means not just mines, but also refineries, processing centers, and high-tech factories popping up where there used to be nothing but snowdrifts and silence. While others are talking, Canada's busy paving roads and stringing power lines. Slowly but surely, they're turning snowfields into a high-tech playground. Getting to all that buried treasure used to be nearly impossible. After all, we're talking about land so remote that roads literally stop hundreds of miles too early. The ground is frozen solid for most of the year. And even if you found something valuable, just getting out was a logistical nightmare. So what changed? Canada has an ace up its sleeve. Don't know about you, but I use it mainly for making memes and music. But geologists? They're scanning the Arctic like it's Minecraft with X-ray vision. Instead of drilling blind, they're using decades-old core samples, plugging them into AI, and getting shockingly accurate predictions about what's underground. It's like upgrading from a pirate's treasure map to a GPS that actually says, "Dig here." Companies like Geologic AI and Cobalt Metals are already doing this, pouring data into AI and getting X marks the spot hits for nickel, cobalt, and rare earths. In the Northwest Territories, Canada is running a pilot lab that uses AI and digital scanning to reanalyze decades-old rock samples. The goal is to spot hidden mineral deposits that old methods might have missed without digging a single new hole. All that sounds great, but maybe I made it sound simpler than it is. Digging up the Arctic is a logistical nightmare. For starters, this isn't just a remote patch of land. The Canadian Arctic is huge. Almost half the country, stretching over Yukon, the Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. We're talking about a region larger than India, with fewer people than a small city. Most of it is permafrost, wilderness, or ice-covered islands scattered across the Arctic archipelago. Temperatures go from barely 50 degrees Fahrenheit during summer to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit or colder, with ground that stays frozen for most of the year. Fun fact: did you know that negative 40 degrees happens to be the same as negative 40 degrees Celsius? It's the one temperature where both scales intersect. They climb at different rates, but eventually cross paths when it gets cold enough. Just a small trivia nugget for weather nerds like me. Anyways, you can't just roll in a truck and break ground in the Arctic. Up there, roads just stop. Want to build something? It can take years. And one nasty winter can put everything on ice. And if you want to continue up north, you need more of everything. More food, more fuel, more machines. Which means even more money. Speaking of money, another chilling fact is how much this all costs. Mining in the far north is way more expensive than doing it in, say, Australia or Chile. An AI might tell you where the minerals are, but people and big machines still have to dig. And that costs a fortune. But that's not all. Most of the Canadian North is Indigenous land. First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities have lived there for thousands of years, and mineral hotspots often sit right on their ancestral grounds. So when Canada talks about unlocking the Arctic, it's not just a question of roads and robots. It's a question of partnership and collaboration. And that's not optional. Legally, projects on Indigenous land require consultation and, in many cases, consent. The good news, some communities aren't just involved, they're leading the way. In regions like Nunavut and the Northwest Territories, Indigenous-owned corporations and world powers are already shaping how development happens on their terms. If Canada wants to pull this off, it's going to need more than tech and funding. It's going to need trust. So with all that in mind, can Canada pull this off? Honestly? With technological advancements and partnerships, it doesn't seem impossible. But Canada isn't just doing one thing right. It's doing a bunch of things at the same time. Let's recap. Hidden resources? Checked. New strategy? In place. Big funding? Approved. AI tools? Deployed. Indigenous partnerships? Underway. Infrastructure? Already breaking ground. It's a snowball turning into an avalanche. Exploration boosts investment. Investment speeds up roads. Roads unlock more deposits. More deposits attract more factories. It's a feedback loop, and if they keep feeding it, the whole Arctic operation could go from an idea to empire faster than anyone expects, giving a whole new meaning to the phrase frozen assets. But this doesn't just help Canada. It could save the US a whole lot of trouble. If all goes to plan, the US won't need to ship rare earths halfway across the planet. It can just look north, wave at the caribou, and get what it needs from its closest neighbor. That's why the US has publicly backed the effort, offering support and funding to help build a trusted North American supply chain. For Canada, this could be the moment it stops being just a supplier of raw materials and starts becoming a critical power broker in the clean tech economy. For the US, it's like discovering your neighbor has been secretly building a battery factory in their backyard, while you were building electric vehicles. And globally? Well, the abundance of resources tends to lower the prices, and that's always a good thing for us regular people. Cheaper cobalt, nickel, and lithium mean cheaper batteries, and cheaper batteries mean more affordable electric vehicles, energy storage, phones, laptops, the works. Now, don't get too excited just yet. Like we said, mining in the Arctic isn't cheap, but in theory, once Canada's clean tech engine is fully up and humming, more supply and shorter supply chains should gradually bring costs down. And it's not just about price tags, it's about stability. Right now, if one country cuts exports or gets caught in politics, everything down the line gets shaky. But with Canada stepping in as a reliable supplier, the global system might get a bit more breathing room. Manufacturers can stop sweating over single points of failure and start building with confidence. This is Australia. And here, a little to the south, is its island part called Tasmania. It's a giant island with beautiful and rich nature, great weather, and delicious food. But for some reason, very few people live here. Something makes people leave this place. Something prevents people from moving here. And this something is… let's find out. So, the population of Tasmania is over 500,000 people. That's not a lot. In fact, Tasmania is Australia's smallest state by population, but it's the 26th largest island in the world. Its area is about the size of Ireland or Switzerland. In other states, the area is much smaller, and there are quite a lot of people. For example, over 8 million residents live in New South Wales, more than 7 million in Victoria, and over 5 million in Queensland. Also, mainland Australia is much more likely to endure fires and scorching sun. Tasmania has a fairly cool climate and amazing nature. So, what's the reason? Why do so few people live here? Let's visit the southeastern part of Tasmania, where the Tasman Peninsula is located. If you look at the map, you'll see that there's the Tasman Sea connected to the boundless Pacific Ocean. So it looks like the Port Arthur we're going to visit is on the edge of the world. In the past, there was Tasmania's official prison here that opened in 1830. Prisoners served their sentences and worked at a logging station. It was hard work, and many could not survive it. It's scary to imagine what happened inside the walls of this prison and how many people stayed there forever. But think for yourself. The Tasman Peninsula is on the edge of the world. There's almost nothing here except wild nature. Prisoners arrived there on ships and spent long hours doing hard work. There was no air conditioning or a soft bed. There was no hope of getting out of there. Some guards treated them cruelly. They were starving. Some got bitten by venomous snakes. There was nowhere to escape. The prison closed in 1877, but even today, it still inspires horror among tourists. not only because of its appearance and history, but also because of the strange phenomena that occur there. According to rumors and legends, the spirits of prisoners roam the territory of Port Arthur. And on Monday morning, you can hear bells ring in an old ruined church building. But the thing is, the bells haven't been there for a long time. Of course, those are all rumors, and there are no confirmed facts. But you might feel uncomfortable in this place because of its sinister past and creepy atmosphere. Port Arthur is one of the most mysterious places in Tasmania. But there's something worse. Welcome to Franklin House. It's a large estate with gardens and a huge building. There's a chance that as soon as you cross the threshold of this house, you will want to leave immediately. There are a lot of antiques here, but there's also something elusive and sinister in the air. This house was built by a former convict. 4 years after the construction, he leased the mansion to a schoolteacher who turned it into an academy for boys. It's not known what happened in the walls of this building in the past, but today, according to rumors, mysterious phenomena take place here. Objects move by themselves. Eerie noises come from empty rooms, and shadows of human figures are spotted in halls. Plus, according to a non-profit company that researches mysterious phenomena, there's an increased level of electromagnetic activity in this house. What does it mean? Nature? Weather? Or phantoms? Choose for yourself what to believe in. Okay, there are 2 creepy places in Tasmania, but the reason why people leave this place is different. We're getting closer and closer to it. Hobart is the capital of Tasmania, and there's an old prison here, where people still run tours. Tourists come here to tickle their nerves, because the most terrible sentences were carried out here. There are rumors about strange smells, flickering shadows, and a creepy atmosphere that make this place scary. Yes, if you're a tourist and come here for fun, you will get an interesting experience. But if you're a local and live nearby, then maybe it might bother you. But of course, an abandoned old prison wouldn't discourage people from living on a giant, picturesque island. There's a bigger reason. There's a city in Tasmania called Richmond. According to local legends, once upon a time, George Grover lived here. He was a security guard who kept order during the construction of the Richmond Bridge, which was built by convicts. George Grover was an evil man who treated prisoners cruelly. One day, the prisoners decided to take revenge on him and pushed him off the bridge. Since then, rumors have been circulating that the spirit of George Grover is walking under the bridge with his big black and white dog, which is called Grover's dog. Tourists and locals reported they had seen this evil security guard at night. He didn't harm them, but gave a severe fright. Many terrible events related to escaped prisoners also took place on the island, so judging by the history of Tasmania, there's been a lot of pain and misery here. Perhaps this affects the overall energy of the island. But is this the reason why so few people come to live here? Now we'll finally learn the most terrifying explanation. Are you ready? Please get away from the screens if you're faint of heart. There's almost no internet connection in some parts of the island. Boo! The signal is very weak and unreliable, which makes it impossible for people to work remotely and watch our videos. Besides, Tasmania is separated from Australia by the Bass Strait, which creates logistical difficulties for trade and traveling. Today in 2025, would you agree to live on a huge island with bad internet? You will also have to pay more and wait longer for the delivery of any goods. One of the main sources of income is tourism. In addition, rental prices are rising here, especially in central cities. Because of logistical difficulties, prices for food and necessities are rising here. One of the biggest problems is waiting lists in public hospitals in Tasmania. People who need modern medical care have to wait a long time for their turn, or they gotta spend tons of money to get to the mainland. Tasmania is getting old. More and more young people are leaving this place. There are no major corporate headquarters on the island. There are no large enterprises here like in Sydney and Melbourne, which means there are few career opportunities. Low salaries and unemployment are forcing young people to move to the mainland. The falling standard of living creates serious demographic problems. On the one hand, this is bad. The fewer people there are, the more difficult it is to raise the economy, to run agriculture, and somehow improve this region. But on the other hand, it's good for nature. About 24% of Tasmania's land area is a World Heritage Site. This territory is one of the last in the world to have cool rainforests. It's also home to one of the richest archaeological sites in Australia. Scientists found evidence that people lived here at least 20,000 years ago. Of course, these factors are not as creepy as the stories about haunted houses, but they can scare you away from moving to Tasmania. The idea that you live almost on the edge of the world, surrounded by the endless waters of the ocean, can be scary. You can meet unique animals that don't live anywhere else in the world and see incredible trees. For example, the Centurion tree, which is eucalyptus, is one of the tallest and oldest trees in the world. Its height is about 330 feet, and its age is about 400 years. The nature of Tasmania is incredibly beautiful. There's so much peace and calm here. In a sense, it's a paradise. But let's be honest, would you agree to live here considering all the nuances? Let's hope that people will find ways to improve the economy and raise the standard of living so young people won't leave this region. Hey, you know what would be pretty cool? Having a tiny helicopter on Mars that can buzz around and scan the environment from above. Taking pictures and looking for hidden extraterrestrial life on its own. At some point, somebody at NASA said something like this behind closed doors. Then they went and actually did it. Say hello to Ginny, one of the most significant scientific achievements since we first started exploring space. Back in 2020, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or JPL, packed a tiny side project onto the Mars mission. It was called Ingenuity, a flying experiment meant to test if powered flight was even possible on another planet. Just proof of concept, a test demo. The real mission was to explore the surface of Mars with the rover called Perseverance. In 2021, this six-wheeled robotic scientist about the size of a small SUV landed on Mars in a place called Jezero Crater. Scientists believe there was once a lake here about 3.5 billion years ago. That's important because where there's ancient water, there might have been ancient extraterrestrial life. Perseverance is basically a science lab on wheels. It can study rocks, drill into the surface, and stash samples in little sealed tubes for later. These samples are part of a long-term plan. NASA and ESA plan to bring them back to Earth in 2033 for more study. This could finally answer, has life ever existed outside Earth? Maybe samples won't give the definitive answer, but it's our best shot. Suddenly 2033 seems very far away. The rover has other instruments and testing tools that could greatly benefit future exploration of Mars. But the hero of this story is Ginny. They got the idea for this little chopper from drones here on Earth and thought it could fly around and scout for Perseverance. However, actually making it work on Mars sounds almost impossible. The first problem was the atmosphere. Mars has approximately only 1% of Earth's air pressure, which means there's barely anything to push against. On Earth, chopper blades bite into thick air to generate lift. Since there's basically no air on Mars, it's sort of like trying to swim in fog instead of water. Then there's gravity. Sure, it's only about 38% of Earth's, which helps a bit, but not nearly enough to offset the lack of air. To fly at all, the device would have to be feather light, with huge blades spinning like crazy, just to grab onto the thin air. Oh, and there's also the cold. At night, temperatures plunge to negative 130 degrees Fahrenheit, which is approximately the same as the coldest night ever recorded in Antarctica. That's enough to damage most electronics, and batteries hate the cold. So Ginny charged up during the day with a tiny solar panel, then used that power to keep warm through the freezing Martian night. Every day, scientists had to hope that their drone worth $80 million wouldn't land under a hill in a shadow, especially since it couldn't be controlled manually. Mars is so far away that signals can take up to 20 minutes to get there. Imagine playing a video game where your character has that kind of delay after you press a button. Ginny had to be fully autonomous. All these technological technicalities, and yet Ginny did not simply fly. What was first planned as a 30-day test trial with 5 flights ended up being a full-fledged support mission that lasted 3 years. So, how did engineers pull it off? First, they had to make Ginny as light as physically possible, only 4 pounds. That's lighter than my house cat, but somehow it still carried 2 cameras, a battery, a flight computer, a radio antenna, and even a heater. Everything had to be trimmed down or miniaturized. Then came the blades, Ginny's most important feature. On Earth, a small helicopter spins its blades between 400 and 500 RPM. But we explained why that wouldn't work on Mars. So, Ginny's 2 rotor blades had to spin 5 times faster, about 2,500 revolutions per minute. Each blade was about 2 feet long, made from carbon fiber. Light as a feather, but tough as nails. And instead of sitting side by side like on a drone, those blades were stacked on top of each other, spinning in opposite directions. That cancels out the twisting force you'd normally get from a single spinning blade. You know how helicopters have that tiny tail rotor in the back? They need that because when their main rotor on top spins to lift the chopper up, it also creates a twisting force called torque. That makes the entire vehicle want to spin in the opposite direction. Without some way to fight that, you'd end up doing donuts in the sky. However, Ginny couldn't have a tail rotor because it would add too much weight, take more power, and make things even more complicated. So, engineers created a workaround with 2 large blades stacked on top of each other, spinning in opposite directions, which prevented the drone from spinning out of control. As for controlling it, Ginny didn't have a full-blown AI, but it wasn't remote-controlled either. NASA uploaded flight plans from Earth, but once the drone took off, it flew itself using onboard sensors and code. Basically, like a really smart autopilot. To stay on course, it watched the ground with a downward-facing camera, kind of like tracking its own shadow as a guide. And finally, the result was seen in April 2021, when Ginny lifted off the Martian ground and hovered in place for just 39 seconds. It rose about 10 feet into the air, hovered a bit, spun around a little, and landed safely back on the red dirt. It was short and simple. One small step for a drone, but a huge one for humanity. For the next 3 years, the team responsible was testing the limits, flying Ginny further and further. From above, Ginny saw more than the rover could. The drone helped map the terrain, spotted risks like loose sand and sharp rocks, and even found shortcuts for perseverance. It even saved the rover, so to speak, when its photos helped the team reroute the vehicle around a tricky dune. Ginny also made snapshots of interesting layered rocks, exactly the kind you'd need when you're searching for ancient life. Basically, once the drone spotted something weird or promising from above, Perseverance would roll over to check it out. And it worked way better than anyone expected. However, in January 2024, Ginny went missing. The drone was supposed to do a short hop, go up, hover, land, easy stuff. But after takeoff, NASA lost contact. For a while, no one knew what had happened, just silence. A few days later, NASA finally got a weak signal and pulled the flight data. Turns out, Ginny flew over a featureless terrain. See, it used its downward-facing camera to track movement, kind of like an optical mouse. No texture below meant nothing to lock onto. Mid-flight, the drone got disoriented, tilted, and during landing, one of its blades clipped the ground. NASA confirmed it. The rotor was damaged. It will never fly again. However, this is not a sad story. Even with broken wings, the robot is still useful. After Flight 72, NASA gave Ginny new software and a new job, staying powered on and quietly collecting daily data, possibly for the next 20 years. In a way, Ginny has gone from scout to ground-based observer. So, what happens next? Well, we wait for 2030 while we make more flying robots. The biggest one on the horizon is Dragonfly, a car-sized rotorcraft scheduled to launch in 2028 and land on Titan, one of Saturn's moons. Titan has a thick atmosphere and low gravity, a dream environment for a flying drone. Dragonfly will hop from one location to another, searching for life in that icy landscape. It's like Ginny's big cousin, but with nuclear power and a whole moon to explore. The project Ingenuity's success is already inspiring NASA to design better Martian helicopters. Some of them could be equipped with grippers to pick up rock samples, or even join up with rovers for full-on search and collect operations. Thanks to Ginny, what started as a tech demo could one day evolve into a fleet of flying robots crisscrossing the red planet. A giant wormhole, or simply said, a connection between regions of space-time, opens up in space near Earth. Our world faces chaos unlike anything before. Satellites incinerated, skies ripped open by radiation storms, entire power grids blacked out. The atmosphere is swelling and scorching, the oceans are boiling, the magnetic shield is shattering. Suddenly, the wormhole destabilizes. Space-time starts to unravel, tearing Earth apart from the inside out. People are seeking shelter, but nothing can save them anymore. Look at this devastation. This isn't just a sci-fi scenario. It's a cosmic apocalypse waiting to happen and rewrite the fate of humanity. The thing is, some black holes might actually be secret space portals. It may sound like something straight out of Stranger Things, but it's not. Scientists have been wondering for years if some black holes could actually be wormholes in disguise, tunnels through space and time. And now, a new study says this might actually be possible, at least in theory. Wormholes are like cosmic shortcuts that let you pop out in a totally different part of the universe. Unfortunately, we've never found one, and the whole concept still lives in the land of what if. Here's the problem. To actually make a wormhole work, you'd need something called negative energy. That's not just rare. It doesn't even exist in the regular universe. Maybe in some weird world of quantum physics, but even there, it's super uncertain. Still, scientists have a wild thought. What if some black holes aren't just giant space vacuums that swallow everything around them, but are really hidden wormholes? The odds of that are tiny, like winning the lottery while getting struck by lightning and discovering extraterrestrials at the same time. But mathematically, it's not impossible. That's where the new study comes in. Researchers looked at a weird type of black hole called a Schwarzschild black hole. These ones don't spin, don't have electric charge, and, very predictably, are totally hypothetical. They're just the math version of a black hole, not something we've seen in space. In any case, the team studied something called quasi-normal modes, which is just a fancy way of saying how space vibrates around a black hole when you mess with it. These vibrations don't go on forever. They fade out like the ringing sound you get when you hit a bell. By analyzing those space-time vibes, scientists tried to figure out if they could tell the difference between a regular black hole and a wormhole pretending to be one. It turns out that it's super hard to tell this difference. But maybe that's the point. Wormholes might be hiding in plain sight, wearing black hole costumes like it's space Halloween. Wormholes could copy a black hole's behavior almost perfectly, at least on paper. The researchers uploaded the whole study to Arxiv, which is where science nerds drop their ideas before they hit the big journals. And it's already been published in Physical Review D, which is a serious physics magazine. The coolest thing, though, is that it isn't a brand new idea. Scientists have been debating this whole black hole or wormhole thing for decades. Back in 2021, some researchers wondered if the giant black holes at the centers of galaxies, called active galactic nuclei, were actually wormhole entrances. And in 2022, a team in Bulgaria said that the light coming from a wormhole could look almost exactly like what comes from a black hole. There's also this sci-fi level theory that some black holes might be paired with opposite twins, called white holes. A white hole basically spits stuff out instead of sucking it in. Together, a black and a white hole could form a wormhole tunnel. But no one's found a white hole either yet, so that idea is still just theory. By the way, in this latest study, the authors have shown that wormholes and black holes not only look similar, but also sound similar. At least in how space-time shakes around them when they get hit with something. So our next move should be fine-tuning our scientific models, especially near the part of the wormhole called the throat. Scientists want to see if wormholes could fake even more black hole-like behavior, but it's tricky. Some of the math gets super hard. In any case, how about finding out more about these mysterious wormholes? You've seen them in every second sci-fi movie. Magical space tunnels that let you skip across the universe. Einstein was the first one to have dreamed them up. Wormholes are still 100% hypothetical, and we've never spotted one. But that doesn't stop people from theorizing. Like, what if a wormhole started sucking in matter like a black hole does? If a wormhole started eating stuff like dust, gas, or space debris, it would create a plasma tornado, a literal space firestorm in its throat. And this twisty storm would eventually blast out the other side of the wormhole, firing hot plasma at nearly 125 million miles per hour. That's about 1/5 the speed of light. It would also be insanely hot in there, so hot it could probably trigger nuclear fusion. Of course, all of this is still just theoretical. No one's seen a wormhole do this. No one's seen a wormhole do anything, actually. But the math says it could happen, if we ever find a wormhole. The bright side of it all is that we would probably spot an event with so much drama. Even though wormholes don't have an event horizon, aka the point of no return, like black holes, they still bend light. Normally, you might not be able to see something like that, but this thing is so absurdly bright from the plasma firestorm that you would actually see it glowing in space. Think of it like a black hole, but with a glowing center instead of just darkness, and a jet of flaming plasma shooting out one side like a broken space faucet. Still, don't get your hopes up for spotting one anytime soon. Even if we did find a wormhole, it probably wouldn't last long. It could break apart or transform into a completely different type of space-time before we even realized what we were looking at. Plus, keep in mind that wormholes might look almost exactly like black holes unless you know what kind of light polarization, how light waves line up, to look for. Now let's talk a bit more about black holes themselves. You're likely to know them as insane space beasts that suck up everything nearby, gas, dust, even light. And once something crosses a black hole's event horizon, it's trapped forever. Scientists say that inside, everything gets crushed into a tiny point called a singularity, where the usual rules of physics totally break down. But back in 2010, a physicist named Nikodem Pawlowski had a crazy idea. What if black holes don't have singularities? Instead, what if the center of a black hole is actually a doorway to another universe? Maybe our entire universe was born from matter shooting out of a black hole in some parent universe. Pawlowski's theory uses something called torsion, which is like a weird gravitational twist that stops matter from getting crushed infinitely. Because of torsion, instead of crashing into a singularity, matter inside a black hole can create a tunnel, a so-called Einstein-Rosen bridge, or simply a wormhole, connecting a black hole to a white hole. So, imagine matter falling into a black hole in one universe, then popping out of a white hole in another. Pawlowski thinks this could explain the Big Bang, but as a big bounce, meaning the universe keeps cycling through phases of expansion and contraction, not just one huge explosion. Sadly, if such a tunnel existed, it would be a one-way trip. Nothing would come back through to the original universe. Some scientists are still skeptical because torsion hasn't been proven yet, but other experts think Pawlowski's model is super promising. They even go further and say that our whole universe might be living inside a giant black hole hundreds of billions of light years wide. Now, we just need to figure out how to test this. Future space studies might give us more clues, like checking if our universe is closed, which basically means that it's curved, without an edge, or digging deeper into cosmic background radiation, which is the leftover glow from the Big Bang.
There's something curious about Scotland when seen from above. An almost perfectly straight line cuts right across the country from coast to coast. You might have never noticed, but that giant scar has existed for hundreds of millions of years. And right along its path lies one of Earth's biggest mysteries, the Loch Ness Monster. Meet the Great Glen Fault. Just like other major fault zones around the world, it was born because of the movement of Earth's tectonic plates. So let's go back in time, like 430 million years ago. At that point, a massive geological drama was going on called the Caledonian Orogeny. Now, orogeny is just a fancy scientific word for how mountains are formed. So this whole region looked totally different back then. There were these three ancient continents called Laurentia, Baltica, and Avalonia. Think of them like, giant puzzle pieces slowly floating around on Earth's surface. Over millions of years, these enormous chunks of land drifted and eventually smashed into each other. When they collided, the edges of the continents crumpled and folded, kind of like a piece of paper bunching up when you push it from both sides. But some scientists believe the continents didn't just crash straight into each other. Instead, they started sliding sideways past one another. Imagine pressing your fingertips together and rubbing your hands back and forth. That sideways motion is what scientists call a strike-slip fault. What I mean is, these massive blocks of rock move side to side rather than up and down. So, bit by bit, the land on either side of the fault kept inching past each other, shifting by several miles over geologic time. During the late Cretaceous to early Tertiary, which happened roughly 66 million years ago, the region shifted once again. This time, scientists believe the land's displacement was about 64 miles. Then, the ice ages came along. Rivers and glaciers found that giant crack in the Earth and dug it out even more, making it deeper and wider. That's how they carved out the lakes that follow the fault's path. Finally, dump all of that into a geological blender, and there you have it, the Great Glen Fault in all of its majestic glory today. Yep, all that movement of the land helped sculpt the mountains and deep valleys that shape the highlands as we see now. Now the interesting thing is, the story of the Great Glen Fault doesn't stop in Scotland. This scar in Earth's crust actually has a secret twin across the ocean. The fault probably continues on the other side of the North Atlantic, over in North America. But over there, it's no longer one continuous crack. About 200 million years ago, Earth decided to shake things up. That's when the Mid-Atlantic Ridge began forming, basically a giant underwater mountain range that started pushing the continents apart and broke the original fault. So now, the North American side of the Great Glen Fault shows up as what is now called the Cabot Fault, also known as the Long Range Fault. It slices through the length of northwestern Newfoundland in Canada and even stretches out into the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Meanwhile, back in Scotland, the fault lines up perfectly with the Great Glen, a valley about 62 miles long, stretching from Inverness in the northeast all the way to Fort William. And it's filled with gorgeous lochs. One of the largest and most famous of these lochs, of course, is Loch Ness. Yes, I'm talking about the Loch Ness, that mysterious stretch of water that's said to be home to the Loch Ness Monster. You know, the legendary creature with the long neck that likes to poke out of the water every now and then, and that sends shivers down the spines of anyone lucky or unlucky enough to catch a glimpse. At least, that's what people say. But despite many years of searching for the creature, everything from thermal imaging drones to miniature submarines, no one has found any real evidence of the monster. And one interesting fact is that the Loch Ness Monster might be directly linked to the Great Glen Fault. Some geologists think that plenty of Nessie sightings might actually be, well, just simple bubbles, big ones, and they were probably caused by the fault itself. The thing is, all the movement in this region hasn't been confined to millions of years ago. Over the past 150 years or so, there have been occasional moderate earthquakes rumbling through the highlands. When the fault lines shift, even just a tiny bit, they can release gas pockets trapped underground. Then rising gas bubbles can disturb the surface of a lake, creating ripples, waves, or sudden bursts of movement across the water. And that's exactly the kind of thing that might look to someone standing on the shore like a giant creature swimming just beneath the surface. But in reality, it could simply be the Earth shifting by a fraction of an inch along that ancient fault. Or, as I like to put it, the lake has farted. Big question, is this region still moving? I mean, is this big geological map actually getting bigger nowadays? Well, it's hard to say, because scientists don't all agree. Some researchers think the Great Glen Fault is still active today. They consider it a reactivated strike-slip fault, meaning there might still be some action happening deep underground. The rocks on either side might still be straining and inching past each other. And in fact, occasional moderate tremors have been recorded over the past 150 years, usually with magnitudes of around 3 or 4. But not everyone is convinced. Other scientists point out that there is no solid evidence of significant modern activity along the main fault. And the seismic activity over the past few centuries hasn't been strong enough to prove the fault is seriously on the move. Take the Inverness earthquake that happened in 1901, for instance. To this day, it's considered one of the strongest that ever happened in Scotland. People felt it all across the country, and the earthquake damaged several buildings in Inverness. The situation was so intense that it gave the feeling of, oh boy, this crack is definitely growing. But the specialists aren't so convinced. Some believe it likely happened on a secondary fault connected to the Great Glen Fault, but not directly on the main fault itself. So, once again, it's hard to say for sure whether the Great Glen Fault is still actively moving today. Despite all the different studies and debates over many years, there are only a few conclusions about this huge gap that everyone agrees on. The fault is unusually straight, it is super ancient, and it is extremely deep by any standards. That's not the only cool fact about Scotland's territory, though. Let's travel to the islands that lie off the northwest coast of the mainland, to the Isle of Skye. This place was once home to a wide variety of dinosaurs during the Middle Jurassic period. The thing is, finding dinosaur fossils from this time period is super rare, but the Isle of Skye is an exception. Specialists discovered that about 167 million years ago, give or take, dinosaurs were mingling on the muddy edges of a warm lagoon over there. As they gathered around this ancient watering hole, they left behind layers of overlapping footprints. Specialists first noticed these tracks in the early 1890s, but at the time, they concluded that the impressions were petrified burrows of ancient fish. But then, in 2019, a graduate student from the University of Edinburgh went there and figured, nah, these are definitely three-toed dinosaur footprints. And he was right. Over several years of fieldwork, he and his colleagues discovered more than 130 individual prints. The team believes that the tracks were left by megalosaurs. These were large dinosaurs, around 20 feet long, and they were serious meat-eaters. In fact, they sat right at the top of the local food chain during the Middle Jurassic. But at the time those footprints were made, these big boys probably weren't hunting prey. No, their tracks show that they were just walking around, wandering in different directions, probably hanging out near the water. And this spot is so special because it gives us a rare peek into what life was like in the Jurassic period.
In Colombia, people saw a small round object floating in the sky which then fell to the ground. They recorded it on video and picked it up. It turned out to be a strange round metal sphere. There were no turbines or propellers on it, which are common for drones. Plus, according to eyewitnesses, the sphere was cold after it fell to the ground. It weighs only 4.5 pounds, which is twice as light as a bowling ball. But the most interesting thing is what was written on it. Unknown symbols resembling the runes and writings of ancient civilizations, like those from Mesopotamia. With the help of AI, a researcher managed to decipher the mysterious inscription, and this is what it read. the origin of birth through union and energy in the cycle of transformation, meeting point of unity, expansion, and consciousness, individual consciousness. What? It sounds too philosophical and fanatical, but what do you think? Okay, the inscription is more or less clear, but what about the composition of the sphere? What is its origin? Its design differs from standard production methods since it has no welding seams and joints. Using X-rays, scientists saw the interior of the sphere. It turned out that the sphere consisted of 3 layers and had 9 to 18 microspheres inside, depending on different sources. All of them were located around the core. Obviously, many people started to claim that this was some kind of unknown technology from another planet. How it floated and why it turned out to be cold is unknown, but let's be honest. If it was really some unknown mysterious object from space, then the whole world would already be talking about it. The sphere looks like an art object or something like that. And all these tricks with hovering as well as the encrypted message seem to be part of some kind of performance. Most internet users have the same opinion, by the way. What do you think is the point of this project? Perhaps the artist wanted to show how easy it was to make people believe in extraordinary things. Or if you read the deciphered words attentively, it looks like a philosophical message encouraging us to stop ruining the planet and claiming that progress and nature must unite. But how did it fly? Perhaps the artist or someone else drew a flying sphere on a computer and added it to the recorded video and then threw it on the ground. To be honest, the sphere from Colombia is not very surprising, unlike these small spheres that were found in a 3-billion-year-old rock. It happened in South Africa in the 80s. Mysterious spheres similar to tiny cricket balls are called Klerksdorp spheres. They have a smooth surface and tiny lines running through the center. They look like they were created by some ancient cave human, but the only catch is that 3 billion years ago, there were no humans. There weren't even any dinosaurs. So who or what created these things? Many pseudoscientists say that the spheres were created by extraterrestrial civilizations. An employee of the museum where they were kept even said the spheres spun on their own. How was it possible? A thorough analysis revealed the truth. The answer was simple. The creator of the spheres is nature. These things are called concretions and are found in various places around the world. The small balls are made up of various minerals and rocks. But how does nature create them? There's a small grain of sand inside the stone. For millions and billions of years, water with minerals envelops this grain in layers, and thus, a small ball is formed. And these lines on the sphere are the traces of the stone inside which this sphere grew. But how did they roll in the museum? Very simple. Round objects can roll with the slightest push. Not far from the place where the museum is located, people mined gold. It probably caused small earthquakes, and the shaking of the ground made the spheres move. So, nothing strange here. But if these little spheres were moving and making weird loud noises, it would be pretty creepy. Fortunately, there was no such thing in the museum. But something similar happened in Jacksonville. A large metal sphere the size of a bowling ball became perhaps the most famous sphere in the world after the Betts family found it at the Fort George Island Forest in 1974. Jerry, Antoine, and their 21-year-old son Terry were walking in the woods around their private property when Terry found a mysterious metal ball. He thought it was a beautiful souvenir, so he took it with him. The strange artifact stayed in the house like a trinket. No one paid any attention to it until Terry started playing guitar. At that moment, the sphere rolled on its own. Or not. You'll find out later. It changed direction and stopped, then vibrated and made a high-pitched sound that made dogs whine and cover their ears. All the family members immediately realized that this was something bizarre. One of the first people the Betts family told about the sphere was a radio host who loved mysterious stories. It's worth noting that in the 70s, the topic of extraterrestrial civilizations was very popular. Therefore, Bet's sphere became a superstar very quickly. The radio host confirmed that the sphere was behaving quite strangely. Then, another person did it. After that, the family started inviting journalists to the house. Stories about the Bet sphere spread throughout Jacksonville, and very soon across the country. Newspapers wrote about the extraterrestrial origin of the sphere. Journalists interviewed the members of the Betts family. People seem to be going crazy because of this story. Of course, the news about the mysterious artifact reached the country's authorities. The US Navy decided to take a look at the Betts sphere to make sure it wasn't their technology. But what if it was some kind of secret development that fell out of a plane and ended up in the hands of civilians? Fortunately for the Navy, this theory turned out to be false. They analyzed the sphere and found out that it was made of stainless steel, but they couldn't figure out who its creator was. But they knew for sure that the sphere had been made on Earth. A tiny triangular chip on the surface caused the ball to roll on the floor in different directions. In such a perfectly balanced object, even a tiny flaw could make the ball move in a strange way. Also, the construction of the house was uneven. Any light touch caused the sphere to move and change direction. The US Navy soon revealed the origin of this mysterious object. It was a large ball bearing that was used as a ball check valve in the pipeline system of a chemical plant. Sometime later, news broke that another similar sphere had been found. It turned out to be part of a valve used in a paper mill. Over time, other details turned up. An artist from New Mexico collected various kinds of scrap metal to use in creating sculptures. He told reporters that he had once loaded a ball check valve onto the roof of his bus and drove through the Jacksonville area in 1971. A few balls fell out. Perhaps one of them rolled off into the woods where the Betts family found it. That's the whole story. No magic or extraterrestrial technology. But despite all these investigations, the Betts sphere still remained famous. People called the family 24 hours a day. Journalists came to their private property to see the sphere. Of course, the family was tired of such popularity. Telling reporters the same things about this sphere over and over again was not the most fun activity. At some point, the members of the family stopped discussing it. In an interview, Jerry Betts said that all this popularity had suppressed the family. They were no longer engaged in investigations related to the spheres, so the exact origin of this thing was not proven. But as you've already heard, the theories seem to be quite true. Dinosaurs, big ancient bugs, creepy spiders, and scary insects are all cute animals compared to the monsters that lived on Earth about 500 million years ago. For example, here's a creature that swam in the water like a stingray and had 3 eyes. Its mouth was like a pencil sharpener. 2 long claws with forked tips like pincers protruded from its head, and its gills were somewhere in the back. This is not a thing from a sci-fi movie. This is Mosaura. Its remains are preserved in excellent condition. Let's look at it more closely and study other similar monsters. The Cambrian explosion. Remember this name. This period is also called the biological Big Bang, the time when a huge number of different living creatures began to appear in the ocean, large, small, and tiny. The ancestors of almost all modern animal groups were most likely born during the Cambrian explosion, which lasted from 541 to 485 million years ago. It was a time when the first truly effective and terrifying predators appeared on Earth. One of them was Mosaura. It's only the size of an index finger, but you would never want to meet such a creature while swimming in the sea. It's scary to imagine what it could do with its pencil sharpener-shaped mouth. And you probably wouldn't be able to hide from it because, come on, it had 2 eyes on the sides and 1 big eye on its forehead. Mosaura belonged to a group of arthropods. Scientists called it a sea moth since it reminded them of a moth. This thing used a flap-like apparatus similar to wings to float in the water like a stingray. This monster was quite creepy, but its appearance may seem familiar. because it's a distant relative of modern spiders, crabs, centipedes, and moths. Scientists found several 506 million-year-old Mosura fossils, but unlike many other similar finds, these ones have been preserved in excellent condition. The found fossils showed sharp claws, a toothy jaw, and large gills in the tail section. Some parts of the fossil were so clear that they revealed the details of the creature's internal anatomy, including parts of its nervous and circulatory systems and digestive tract. It had jointed limbs like those of modern insects and crustaceans. When this monster swam in the sea, it probably grabbed its prey with long spiked claws sticking out of its head. Many Mosura relatives have claws covered with multiple spikes, which help them grab food. But that ancient creature had smooth claws forked at the tips. That is, it grabbed the prey with those tongs, using them like chopsticks, and then brought it to its mouth. Of course, this is an assumption, and nobody saw how this creature actually did it. Unlike many other similar animals, Mosura's posterior segmented body was studded with gills. Scientists don't know why this was necessary, but they assume that such an unusual breathing system helped to adapt to an environment with low oxygen content. Perhaps Mosura led a very active reproductive lifestyle that required high oxygen consumption. Creepy, dangerous, and reproducing fast. An excellent set of qualities for one of the most dangerous predators of antiquity. But what did Mosura eat? It probably caught different types of worms and small arthropods. It's nice to think that this monster lived so long ago and was so small. But what if this creature was the size of a shark and was swimming in the ocean these days? Perhaps it would become a dominant dweller and people would swim much less along the coast. Mosura lived in the water but was discovered in the Burgess Shale Rock Formation in the Canadian Rockies. Many mountains on Earth were once the seabed inhabited by strange creatures. One of them was Opabinia. It had 5 eyes, a mouth facing backward, a long trunk and claws instead of a nose. Wait, what? It's too strange even for science fiction, even for outer space. In its eccentricity, Opabinia was perhaps the loneliest creature on Earth. Scientists couldn't find another species that would be similar to this individual until recently. Meet Utaurora. It seems to belong to the same species as Opabinia. Its inch-long body was divided into 14 to 15 furrows. Each of them ended in a pointed flap. Opabinia had the same body, but it's unlikely that both monsters were friends. The difference between their timelines was several million years. It's hard to imagine why these monsters needed such strange body structures. Why haven't modern filmmakers used the design of those animals to create cool space monsters yet? Okay, they were creepy creatures, but what about weird and kinda useless ones? Scientists have discovered Su, a legless creature with no head turned inside out. Huh? This 444 million-year-old creature was found in South Africa, north of Cape Town. They called it Su after the discoverer's mother. In fact, it's some kind of new arthropod species that may have lived in low-oxygen waters. This creature was turned inside out, and the outer shell with the legs and head was lost. Thanks to mineralization, muscles, tendons, and even Su's intestines were preserved on the fossil. It's a great success to find such detailed remains of an ancient creature. However, scientists still can't determine the evolutionary history of this species. They're sure that it was a primitive marine arthropod. Okay, we can see that 500 million years ago, Earth was filled with creepy monsters, which fortunately are now extinct. But what about trees? Were they the same as we see now? Or was there something else? Something creepy? Oh yeah. Scientists have discovered a new kind of living organism similar to a tree or a mushroom. It was gigantic and had a very minimalistic design. Meet the Prototaxities. It's basically just a big stick with a round end poking out of the ground. It was smooth, didn't have the usual tree bark, and looked more like a mushroom without a cap. But scientists have recently found out that it wasn't a mushroom at all. Prototaxities probably belonged to a previously unknown branch of life. Prototaxities is considered to be the first giant organism in the history of the planet that lived on land. It existed about 420 to 375 million years ago during the Devonian period. It was the time when plants began to spread across dry land, forming large forests. Over time, they began to grow leaves and form roots in the ground. Then, the first seed plants appeared. The real colonization of land began. The first arthropods, such as centipedes, arachnids, and other unpleasant creatures, began to walk among those forests. Meanwhile, the water was filled with a huge biodiversity. There was a giant supercontinent on the planet, and smaller parts began to break off it. During this period, Prototaxities towered over the land. Some of these things reached 26 feet high and 3 feet wide. It's like a 3-story house and as thick as a palm tree. But what was it? A plant? A mushroom? Algae, perhaps? Scientists discovered them in the middle of the 19th century, but only in 2007 did they conduct chemical analysis. Research showed that it was most likely a giant mushroom, but in 2025, scientists refuted this conclusion. It turns out this may have been an unknown life form that existed separately from the kingdom of fungi, animals, plants, and protists. Scientists noticed that the inner part of Prototaxities consisted of a number of tubes. There are similar tubes inside mushrooms, but the tubes of that ancient living thing branched and joined differently. They even had a different chemical composition. The main building block of mushrooms is chitin, but the Prototaxities contained chemicals similar to lignin, a substance found in the bark of trees and other plants, and its anatomy differs from the structure of any other organism known to us. What were they doing on Earth? Just chilled and enjoyed the bloom of life? Did they produce some kind of fruit, like a banana with eyes and claws? Scientists don't know. What if it was something that was brought to Earth from outer space? What if they were flowers planted by another civilization? What do you think?
Okay, let's just say you're driving home and suddenly your GPS freezes. Your phone says you've got full bars, but it takes forever to make a call. Or maybe the call drops for no reason and you have to redial. You brush it off. Probably just your carrier being weird. But then, later, during a house party, your light flickers for a second. No need to panic, you're not haunted by a ghost. At least I hope not. No, it's much more likely that the sun is acting up. Because a giant hole about 500,000 miles wide opened in its atmosphere, and now it's sending strange stuff straight at us on Earth. Okay, so what does that even mean, a hole in the sun? Well, when we look at the sun with highly protective sunglasses, of course, all we can see is a bright, calm star. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Up close, it's total chaos. Its surface boils with magnetic storms. Loops of plasma twist and snap, and every now and then, the outer layer, called the corona, becomes unpredictable. That's what happened recently when a massive region of the sun's atmosphere suddenly changed shape. So scientists call it a coronal hole, but don't picture a crack or a crater. It's more like an open vent in the sun's outer layer. Our star has these invisible forces running through it, like tension lines beneath the surface. Most of the time, they loop back on themselves, but sometimes, in certain spots, they stretch outward into space like open lanes. And that's when stuff starts flying. Particles shoot out at crazy speeds in what we call the solar wind. This wind hurls through space at about 1 million miles per hour, which is fast enough to reach Earth in a few days. The area of the sun where the wind comes from looks darker and cooler than the rest of it. That's why we call it a coronal hole. And the current one is huge, so big that you could fit about 62 Earths side by side. It stretches across a massive chunk of the sun's southern hemisphere and is pointed straight at our planet. So, what exactly is the sun sending our way, and what happens when it gets here? Well, solar wind isn't just fast. It's also packed with tiny charged particles the sun hurls out when it's feeling active. And when that stream runs into Earth's magnetic field, it's like tossing a rock into a still pond. It presses against our planet's magnetic shield, distorting it like a balloon being poked from the outside. That's what creates these breathtaking auroras. However, sometimes the sun takes it even further. Instead of a steady stream, it blasts out a massive cloud of solar material all at once. That's called a coronal mass ejection, or CME. This can mess with GPS and jam signals, as partly because of something called the ionosphere, a charged layer way up in Earth's atmosphere that helps radio signals travel. When that layer gets disturbed, signals start bouncing weirdly or dropping out completely. In late May 2025, Earth was hit by a geomagnetic storm. It was classified as a G3, which means strong. It came from a stream of high-speed solar wind released by a coronal hole and caused visible auroras as far south as Iowa and Oregon. Warnings issued pointed to GPS and shortwave radio disruptions during the storm, but no serious issues were reported. Just a few days later, the situation got worse. On June 1st and 2nd, another storm happened. This time, it was a G4 class. That one is considered a severe level event, just one step below the highest category. The skies lit up. People across the northern U.S., and even as far south as California and New Mexico, saw glowing curtains of green and pink across the night sky. It's the kind of thing you normally have to travel to the Arctic or Antarctic Circle to see. Okay, fine, I'm convinced. Ghosts don't do this stuff. But it wasn't just a light show, although even astronauts aboard the International Space Station were able to capture breathtaking pictures. Airlines received radiation warnings and may have altered some flight paths as a precaution. Satellite operators were monitoring for signal drift, and high-frequency radio used by ships, planes, and amateur operators could have experienced brief disruptions. But then came another one. A few weeks later, in mid-June, Earth was hit by a G2-class geomagnetic storm. It wasn't as intense as the earlier G4 event, which meant less risk for disruptions and another chance to catch glowing skies on camera. Then, just to keep things interesting, the Sun followed it up with a pair of powerful solar flares on June 17th and 19th. Solar flares are distinct kinds of outbursts, but with similar consequences. The Sun's surface is constantly moving, dragging magnetic fields around like tangled cords. Eventually, those lines get twisted so tightly that they snap, and that snap is what causes a solar flare. If a CME is the Sun launching materials, a solar flare is more like the Sun flipping a light switch, except the light is radiation, which floods space at the speed of, well, light. Flares hit fast, sometimes within minutes, and they don't need to carry particles to cause problems. So, while CMEs are like massive clouds of solar blasts that take a day or two to arrive, solar flares are the flash that hits you before you even see it coming. And in mid-June, Earth got hit with two of them, one after another. The second one was the stronger one and briefly knocked out radio communications across parts of the U.S. Why is all this happening? It's not random. The Sun follows a pattern. It goes through phases, kind of like moods. Yeah, solar moods. Every 11 years or so, it gets a little dramatic. More flares, more sunspots, more weirdness. Scientists call this peak period the solar maximum, and we are currently in the middle of one. Right now, we're in solar cycle 25, which is expected to peak sometime between now and early 2026. During this time, the Sun's getting active. It seems like things are just starting to heat up, and we can expect even wilder storms in the coming months. But if that's the case, should we be worried? Well, not really. At least not in a run-for-the-bunkers kind of way. Solar storms don't hurt people directly. You're not going to get sunburned through your roof or microwaved in your sleep. Unless they announce a beautiful aurora, you won't even know it happened. The bigger concern is for the systems quietly running in the background: satellites, navigation networks, and electricity. When the magnetic field gets disturbed, it can cause electric currents to form on the ground. And those currents don't just stay underground, they can sneak into power lines. If those currents get strong enough, they can overload transformers, damage electrical systems, and even knock out entire power grids. That's what happened in Quebec in 1989, when a solar storm blacked out the whole province in 90 seconds. So that's why agencies like NASA and NOAA track solar activity constantly. They know when something's headed our way, how strong it might be, and what kind of warnings to send out. Now, we usually don't think about the sun unless it's too hot or messing with our beach plans, huh? Or when it's freezing and we're stuck indoors, dreaming of summer. But occasionally, it reminds us that it's still a wild thing. A fascinating ball of chaos. It flares, it erupts, it throws giant waves of charged particles across space just to see what happens. And even from 93 million miles away, we feel it. A dropped signal, a beautiful glowing sky, a power flicker. Little hints that we're not as disconnected from space as we'd like to believe. So, the next time your GPS acts weird or your screen glitches for no reason, don't blame your phone or Casper. It just might be the sun feeling moody again.
You're digging in Egypt's famous Sakara necropolis, also known as the ultimate VIP graveyard for pharaohs, when suddenly you find a giant pink door hiding something no one knew existed. Behind this giant stone door, one that wasn't supposed to open, by the way, you find a lost tomb of Egyptian royalty. Alright, history lovers, it's time to buckle up because archaeologists just pulled off something straight out of an Indiana Jones movie. Let's travel all the way to Sakara, one of Egypt's most mysterious and treasure-packed ancient sites. The star of the show? The prince you've probably never heard of, Prince Userefre, son of King Userkaf. No one important, just, the founder of Egypt's 5th dynasty. No big deal. But the way his tomb was discovered… It all started with a massive door, made of pink granite, no less. But this isn't just a regular stone slab. This thing is about 14 to 15 feet tall and 4 feet wide. A giraffe could easily walk through it. This door is also definitely heavier than your neighbor's SUV. But here's the twist. It wasn't a real door. It was a false door. A symbolic gateway meant to allow the spirit of the deceased to pass between the world of the living and the afterlife. Normally, that's where the story ends. After all, false doors are common in tombs. But this one was extra special. You see, false doors were usually made out of limestone, which was pretty common and found everywhere in Egypt. To build one out of red or pink granite, people had to bring these rocks from a quarry located 400 miles away. And you can bet this wasn't a cheap trip. According to Egyptologists, this is the first time a false door of this size and material has ever been found in Egypt, making it a totally unique piece of architecture. Aside from being super expensive, this one had a surprise behind it too. When the team of researchers investigated further, they realized that this false door actually hid a real entrance. And what did it lead to? A hidden tomb, packed with statues, relics, and secrets from over 4,000 years ago. The tomb belonged to Prince Userefre, but you can call him Wasar-Efra or Wasar-Efra too. Despite being totally erased from history, this fella was no minor noble. The hieroglyphs on the pink granite door listed him as the hereditary prince, governor of Buto and Nekeb, royal scribe, minister, judge, and priest of chance. Phew! He was like the ancient Egyptian version of Daenerys Targaryen. These inscriptions not only identify his political and religious roles, but also suggest he held significant power in Lower and Upper Egypt, bridging both regions through his titles. One title in particular, the priest of Sakara, links him to the deity of the necropolis, the one with the falcon head. This god was the patron of the living and god of the dead at the same time. So I guess the Forgotten Prince was sort of a big deal, considering that his tomb was placed in such a prestigious location within Sakara. What's even more mysterious is that Prince Userefre doesn't appear in official king lists or royal family trees, which makes us wonder if he passed away before he could rule. or if his legacy was deliberately erased in one of ancient Egypt's classic political dramas. Some scholars now believe his erasure might be connected with shifting religious or political power struggles during the early 5th dynasty, especially as his father Userkaf was reshaping Egypt's religious order. And speaking of his father, King Userkaf was a total game changer. He wasn't just the founder of the 5th dynasty, he also kicked off a religious revolution by promoting the sun god Ra over older deities. That's right, Userkaf built the very first sun temple at Abu Sir, setting off a dynasty-wide obsession with solar worship. After Userkaf wrapped up his short but revolutionary reign, a whole lineup of pharaohs took the stage. Sahure, Neferirkare, Nusere-Ini, basically the boy band of the 5th dynasty. And these guys were all about two things: building pyramids and making money. They weren't just stacking stones, they were expanding Egypt's influence, opening up trade routes to far-off lands and blinging out their temples like it was nobody's business. Back in the tomb, things got even cooler. There was a beautiful red granite offering table covered with inscriptions detailing ritual foods, like an eternal menu for the afterlife, because they believed the deceased could magically eat this food. Fun fact, it was the funerary priests and their families that actually ate the food. There were also pottery shards, amulets, and painted walls, but the real showstoppers were the statues. And this is exactly where things get weird, in a good way. The team found statues of King Djoser, the guy who built Egypt's first pyramid, his wife, and their 10 daughters, inside Prince Userefre's tomb. Hold up, Djoser lived a few centuries before Userkaf, so what were his statues doing there? Turns out, scientists don't really know. These statues were built during the reign of King Djoser himself and probably belonged to that first ever built pyramid. Experts believe these statues were probably relocated during the 26th dynasty, thousands of years after Djoser, maybe to protect them from destruction, or maybe because they were still venerated. Basically, ancient Egyptians were hoarders, but classy ones. Scientists also know for a fact that some engravings and statues found there were made way later, which means that this tomb probably turned into a deposit for fancy stuff. Or maybe this was just really ancient interior decorating. Anyway, that wasn't all. There was another pink granite entrance on the eastern side of the tomb, with inscriptions linking back to King Neferirkare, another 5th dynasty pharaoh who also tried to build his own pyramid, but failed. And near this second entrance, archaeologists found something never seen before in Sakara: a set of 13 pink granite statues, all sitting in a row on a high-backed bench, like they were waiting at the DMV of the afterlife. Some had elevated heads, probably representing the prince's wives, while others were missing their heads entirely. One black granite statue was found upside down. Maybe it had taken a tumble sometime during the tomb's long, quiet centuries underground. According to archaeologists, the positioning and head shapes suggest that these statues followed a strict social hierarchy, with the central figures likely representing higher status individuals, while the headless ones might indicate unfinished work or later vandalism. And speaking of black granite statues, another one was found standing proudly inside the tomb. Based on its design and inscriptions, it looks like it was placed there during the 26th dynasty, the same time those Djoser statues were probably moved in. This suggests the tomb didn't just sit abandoned, it was reused, adapted, and maybe even honored by later generations. And by the way, black granite was associated with Osiris, the god of the underworld, during the late period, which means that this statue's presence is a clue that the tomb was a ritual space long after the prince's death. All of this, giant granite doors, surprise statues, reused tombs, adds up to a truly thrilling find. Prince Userefre may not be a household name yet, but his tomb is now one of the most fascinating ever found in Sakara. It tells a story not just of the Old Kingdom, but of how ancient Egyptians kept connecting to their past, even thousands of years later. So, what does it all mean? Why hide a tomb behind a fake door? Why pack it with statues from different eras? And who exactly was Prince Userefre? These are the kinds of mysteries that keep archaeologists digging and keep the rest of us fascinated. In the end, this discovery isn't just about one tomb, it's about how much is still waiting beneath the sands of Egypt. As more gets uncovered, we're reminded again and again that ancient history isn't gone. It's just sleeping behind massive pink granite doors.
Hey, I bet you didn't know that trees used to grow in the middle of Egypt's barren, sun-roasted Sinai desert. It's true. If you can't picture it, I don't blame you. But archaeologists have recently stumbled upon a tree-lined boulevard. Yep, an actual green avenue leading to a massive ancient fortress. No, this isn't some mirage or an overactive imagination, although I do have one. But it's turning our ideas of ancient Egyptian desert life upside down. Let's rewind a bit. The site in question is called Tel Abu Saifi, located in the northern part of the Sinai Peninsula. For a long time, it was known as a dusty archaeological footnote, the home of ruins from the Ptolemaic and Roman periods. You know, the era after Alexander the Great swaggered through Egypt and the Roman Empire called dibs. But recently, Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities decided to give it a fresh dig. And what they found out turned to be more than just a forgotten outpost. We're talking about a full-on military fortress with defensive trenches, paved roads, lime kilns, barracks for soldiers, and even room for their families. A whole bunch of living quarters right in the middle of a desert doesn't feel very homey until you remember our star, the unexpected Green Avenue. This road was over 300 feet long and 36 feet wide, as long as an American football field, paved with limestone slabs and lined with more than 500 clay planting pits. These weren't for show. They held actual trees, creating a shaded tree-lined entrance straight to the fortress. Imagine walking through that, the sun blazing overhead, and suddenly, blessed shade. Ooh. Now, that's not just a grand entrance, that's an ancient red carpet, or maybe a green one. But this wasn't about curb appeal. The existence of hundreds of trees in a desert landscape over 2,000 years ago tells us something big. You see, the Ptolemaic Egyptians weren't simply good at building monuments, they were also masters of water management. In a place where rainfall is rarer than a selfie with a pharaoh, they somehow found a way to grow rows of trees. Now, let that sink in. To irrigate that many trees in a desert, they must have had a sophisticated irrigation or water transport system, something capable of moving and distributing water efficiently in this harsh climate. Maybe they channeled groundwater, or maybe they captured seasonal rain, or maybe ancient sprinkler systems. Okay, maybe not that fancy. But still, it's clear they were ahead of their time. Here's the thing, we already know the Egyptians mastered water control. They harnessed the Nile with ditches and canals to feed distant fields. So irrigation wasn't exactly a mystery to them. They had the skills and the knowledge. And sure, scientists still debate what the Sinai climate was like 2,000 years ago. But many believe it may have once been greener. After all, take one look at those dramatic mountains and rocky landscapes, shaped and sculpted as if by brute force of ancient rivers. And it's hard not to think that water once played a bigger role out there. Plus, archaeologists have found tons of evidence showing that Ptolemaic Egyptians cultivated fruits, vines, and trees on a large scale. In other words, growing a forest in a desert might feel wild to us, but to them, it was just another Tuesday. And now, this Green Avenue is making archaeologists wonder, what if similar irrigation systems were used elsewhere, say for transporting the enormous stones used to build the pyramids? There's already a theory that ancient rivers or human-made canals helped move those stones. And the Tel Abu Saifi discovery? Well, it might just be the missing puzzle piece. This isn't just a dream. Back then, rivers were like highways, power grids, and cargo trains of the ancient world, all rolled into one. Egyptians used them for everything – irrigating crops, trading goods, powering industry, and even mobilizing for war. If you were doing something important, odds are it involved a river. But wait, it gets even better. Excavations revealed deep defensive trenches, like ancient moats, dug more than 6 feet deep around the fortress. Those weren't just muddy ditches. They were part of an elaborate defense system designed to be filled or bridged to control access. Think of it as ancient Egypt's version of a retractable security gate, minus the hydraulics. And while the trenches were keeping intruders out, life inside the fortress was bustling. Remember how we said archaeologists had found military housing units? It turns out soldiers might have lived there with their families. So this wasn't just a barracks, it was a thriving community, with meals, routines, kids playing, and probably a whole lot of ancient gossip flying around the dinner table. In addition to all the military stuff, researchers found 4 massive lime kilns used to produce quicklime, an essential ingredient for making construction mortar. These kilns are a big deal because they suggest that during the later Roman period, Tel Abu Saifi turned into an industrial hub. It was like the Home Depot of ancient Egypt, churning out materials to build and repair buildings. But here's where the plot thickens. Underneath all of this, beneath the roads, the trenches, the kilns, archaeologists found the corners of an even older structure, a mystery building. Could it be the remains of a third, much older fortress? Or an ancient cemetery or lost city? Nobody knows yet, but one thing's clear, this story isn't over. Honestly, this might be the coolest archaeological cliffhanger of the decade. So, what does this all mean? Well, for starters, it challenges everything we assumed about desert life in ancient Egypt. For the longest time, deserts were thought of as natural barriers, dry, deadly, and empty. But this find suggests that the desert might have once been green and full of life, not because the climate was dramatically different, but because the Egyptians were incredibly good at bending the environment to their will. They didn't just survive in the desert, they transformed it. It also adds fuel to the fire in the age-old debate about ancient Egyptian tech. If they could build a fortress with tree-lined roads, moats, irrigation, and industry in the middle of the Sinai, is it really such a stretch to imagine they could engineer water channels to move pyramid stones? Forget the Ancient Aliens TV show. Sure, it's entertaining, I'll give you that, but it makes us forget something crucial. Those people were brilliant. A lot of what we call modern technology is recycled ancient ingenuity. And who knows how much knowledge we've lost over time. Meanwhile, the dig continues. Scientists are now mapping the entire Tel Abu Saifi site, trying to piece together how all the structures connect. Some want to analyze soil samples to find traces of old tree roots and maybe even figure out what kinds of trees once grew there. Imagine if they were date palms. We might be looking at the world's oldest snack lane. You already know that the implications of the discoveries don't stop with history books, right? This kind of discovery has modern relevance too. Our world is going through a lot of change, with crazy weather and huge heat waves. So maybe we should be asking, what can we learn from ancient civilizations that once made the desert bloom? If nothing else, Tel Abu Saifi reminds us that the ancient Egyptians were more than just pharaohs, pyramids, and mummies. They were visionary planners, eco-architects, and straight-up problem solvers. They didn't wait for nature to hand them what they needed, they engineered it. And thanks to discoveries like this, we're getting a clearer picture of just how advanced and, frankly, how cool ancient Egyptian civilization really was. So next time someone tells you deserts are just empty wastelands, you can hit them with this fun fact. Over 2,000 years ago, in the heart of the Sinai Desert, there was a fortress with a tree-lined avenue, moats, military housing, an industrial center, and even a secret underground structure. Take that, sand dunes! Who knows what else is still buried out there, waiting to rewrite history?
Have you ever visited a famous monument and thought, alright, this is boring? While you were up on the Eiffel Tower yawning at the view, another landmark in Paris was pulling off the ultimate plot twist. Hidden in plain sight at Place de la Concorde stands a 3,300-year-old Egyptian obelisk that's been keeping juicy secrets from Pharaoh Ramses II himself. That's right. Ancient secret messages carved in stone have been right under our noses this whole time. Nope, this isn't the next National Treasure movie. This is real life, and it took a real-life Indiana Jones to crack the code. So, let's set the stage. You've probably seen this block of stone before, right? Towering 75 feet high, this massive granite pillar was originally from Luxor, Egypt, and it's been chilling in the heart of Paris since 1836. It's covered in hieroglyphs, and for years, everyone assumed we'd already cracked their code. Mystery solved. Nothing left to see here. Enter Jean-Guillaume Aulet-Pelletier, French Egyptologist, cryptology expert, and part-time monument whisperer. Basically, if Indiana Jones traded his whip for reading glasses and binoculars, you'd get this guy. He's got a rather unusual hobby. He strolls up to the obelisk every now and then and casually reads hieroglyphs. For fun. Yes, he can read them fluently. No, we don't know what that says about our own hobbies. Until 2021, experts believed that the inscriptions on the obelisk mainly praise the gods Amun or Amun-Ra, if you're on friendly terms, and Horus, you know, the falcon-headed sky god with those super famous parents Osiris and Isis. But during one of his casual reading sessions, Aulet-Pelletier noticed something odd. Some of the hieroglyphs weren't just singing praises to the gods, they were giving directions, literal directions, to the entrance of the temple of Luxor. But wait, it gets even better with a little backstory. Obelisks like this weren't just pretty lawn decorations. They were usually placed at the entrances of major temples, like the Temple of Luxor, where this one originally stood. They symbolize the sun god Ra and were meant to represent a ray of sunlight frozen in stone. Basically, they were giant sacred exclamation points showing off the pharaoh's divine connection and power. Ramses II had 2 of them set up at Luxor's entrance to honor the gods and, of course, to brag about himself. This one got shipped off to France in the 1830s as a gift from the ruler of Egypt, Muhammad Ali. No, not the boxer. And it's been waiting for someone to take a closer look at it. Moving the obelisk to Paris was no small feat. It weighed over 220 tons and had to be transported on a ship built especially for it, called the Luxor. How original. The whole transportation cost the modern equivalent to $19 million. Interestingly, its twin obelisk still stands in Luxor, which means that researchers can compare both structures to see if the story really matches. This pairing of obelisks was intentional, meant to guide the eye and the spirit towards sacred space. Lucky for us, Jean-Guillaume picked the perfect moment to snoop around. The obelisk was undergoing restoration for the upcoming Olympic Games. Scaffolding was up, giving him rare access to the tippy top of the monument. Armed with binoculars and a ladder, he got eye level with parts of the pillar that most of us can only squint at from street level. And that's when he uncovered the real twist. Turns out, ancient Egyptians didn't just chisel random symbols into stone. They had something way cooler up their sleeves: crypto-hieroglyphs. Those were specialized, coded forms of writing used for sacred or elite messages. Basically, ancient VIP-only emojis. While your average temple priest could read standard hieroglyphs, crypto-hieroglyphs were reserved for the pharaoh's inner circle. Today, only 6 people on Earth can read them fluently. And wouldn't you know it, our French friend is one of them. Of course he is. Now, here's where things get wild. Normally, hieroglyphs written on monuments like the obelisk are read top to bottom, right to left. Simple enough. But Jean-Guillaume decided to break the rules and read them horizontally instead of vertically. That's when he started spotting weird patterns, phrases, and symbols that had been hiding in plain sight for nearly 200 years. Some of these messages were so cleverly hidden, and you could only understand them if you walked around the obelisk in a certain way. He calls it 3D cryptography. That's right, the obelisk itself is like one giant ancient Rubik's Cube. Depending on the angle you read from, the message could change entirely. Yes, ancient Egypt invented something like the lenticular effect long before Pokemon cards made it cool. Okay, so what in the world does the message say now? Glad you asked. These aren't just random notes from the past. They're political gold. One inscription praises Ramses II as a divine figure who could not be dethroned. Another says the king made offerings to the god Amun, which wasn't just him being nice. This was a big political move. Back then, religion and power were totally intertwined, so showing off your divine connection was like launching a PR campaign, except instead of tweets, they used 200-ton stone monuments. Ramses II wasn't just any ruler, by the way. He reigned for over 60 years and basically pulled off the Beyoncé of pharaonic careers. He won battles, or at least said he did, built cities, temples, and statues of himself all over Egypt, and declared himself a living god. When he ordered these obelisks, he wasn't just creating monuments. He was launching ancient propaganda flyers at priests, nobles, and visiting dignitaries. In fact, Ramses II was so good at self-promotion, he may as well be the original king of rebranding. He claimed victory at the Battle of Kadesh, even though it ended in a stalemate and they had the victory carved into walls and monuments across Egypt. The Luxor obelisk was another way of reinforcing his godlike powers every time someone passed by or read its text. And here's the cherry on top. Some of these inscriptions were positioned just right so they'd be seen by nobles arriving by boat for a festival. That's probably the reason why they can only be read from a certain angle. But if you stood at the base of the obelisk, you wouldn't see much. But from a 45-degree angle standing right in the middle of the Nile, sweet stuff! Imagine pulling up to a religious celebration and seeing giant stone text basically saying, "Hey, Ramses is chosen by the gods, don't forget it." Subtle? Not exactly. Effective? You bet. Some messages even carry double meanings. One line might spell out Ramses II's full royal title. But read it differently and boom! It says he's got eternal life. That's next-level branding. You can almost hear him saying, "Look at me, still trending 3,000 years later." For decades, scholars thought this monument had given up all its secrets, but thanks to new access, modern tools, and some fresh eyeballs, we now know there's still a ton to uncover. Oleg Pelletier's full research hasn't been officially published yet, but the clues he's found are already shaking up what we thought we knew about ancient Egyptian monuments. Of course, not everyone's buying it just yet. Some scholars are skeptical, especially about the idea that boat-riding nobles could actually see those messages clearly. But let's be honest, ancient advertising wasn't easy. Even if your billboard is 75 feet tall, you still need the right angle and the right audience. So the next time you're in Paris staring at the obelisk while sipping your overpriced café au lait, remember, you're not just looking at a fancy paperweight from the 19th century. You're standing in front of an ancient Egyptian PR campaign, a 3D puzzle, and a 3,300-year-old flex from Ramses II himself. And let's be real, if that obelisk had been hiding messages this long, who's to say it's done talking? So grab your magnifying glass, channel your inner Egyptologist, and remember, the real treasure isn't gold or jewels, it's the drama chiseled in stone.
So astronomers have spotted about a dozen mysterious explosions in space, and no one really knows what they are or why they're happening. At the moment, they occur about 200 million light-years away. But what if, one day, they get much closer to our planet? Now this all started back in 2018. One day, telescopes saw a giant boom far away in space. That explosion was incredibly bright, about 100 times brighter than a normal star explosion, called a supernova. The strange thing was that normal supernovae take weeks or even months to fade away. But that one went from kaboom to poof, gone, in just a few days. It got extremely hot and huge, about the size of our whole solar system, and then vanished like it never happened. Scientists were seriously confused. Now, they named the explosion the Cow, because its official name was too long and not exciting at all. Since then, astronomers have been hunting for more of those oddball explosions. And indeed, they've found a few more and given them weird animal names too. That's how we got the koala in 2018, the camel in 2020, the Tasmanian devil in 2022, and the Finch, or the Fawn, in 2023. All of those are part of a strange group called LFBOTs. That stands for Luminous Fast Blue Optical Transients. Luminous means they're super bright. Fast because they happen and disappear really quickly. The blue color results from their temperature. They're super hot, like 72,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And optical transients means they show up in visible light and don't stick around for long. Even now, the scientists are still scratching their heads, trying to figure out what's causing these bizarre space flashes. It's like the universe is playing a mysterious game, and no one knows the rules yet. At first, scientists thought those space explosions were failed supernovae. That's when a star tries to explode but instead collapses in on itself, kind of like a balloon popping inward. That collapse can create a black hole in the middle that will eat the star from the inside out. But recently, a new theory has popped up, and it's even cooler and creepier. It has to do with black holes, super squished leftovers from exploded stars. They're so powerful that even light can't escape their clutches if it gets too close. That's why they're totally dark and impossible to see directly. Now, some space scientists think that unknown black holes, not too big and not too small, might be pulling in stars that get too close, which produces those explosions. Such holes are called intermediate mass black holes, and no one has actually seen one of those yet. They're like space's biggest mysteries, and we'll try to solve it in a few minutes. But after that, you need to know that a new LEFBOT has shown up in space. It was spotted by a telescope in Liverpool and is currently called AT2024WPP. Yep, scientists still haven't picked an animal name, but they're thinking maybe the wasp. What do you think of this name? Share it in the comments. Anyway, one of the scientists is sure that it's the best one since the cow. The most recent space explosion is super interesting and extremely bright, like me. Maybe the brightest one since this whole LEFBOT thing began in 2018. This new WASP boom also doesn't look like a failed supernova. And still, scientists are checking all the data just to be sure. Now, scientists are pretty sure mid-sized black holes that could cause the explosions must exist somewhere. It's like knowing a secret creature might be hiding in space, but no one has gotten a photo of it yet. Some scientists think that this idea is the most exciting, and that it might even help explain dark matter, one of the biggest mysteries in the entire universe. Well, whatever the truth is, a recent discovery might shed light on the existence of mid-sized black holes. The thing is, when it comes to black holes, space has a few different sizes: small, super huge, and something in the middle. The small ones are called stellar mass black holes. They're around 5 to 50 times heavier than our Sun. The giant ones are called supermassive black holes. Makes sense. They're millions or even billions of times heavier than the Sun. They usually hang out in the middle of galaxies. And then there's the mysterious kind in between, called intermediate mass black holes. Those are like the missing link of black holes. Scientists are pretty sure they should exist, but we barely know anything about them, like where they came from, how they grow, or what they're made of. Good news, that mystery might finally be getting solved. Thanks to several new studies, scientists now have some exciting new clues. Researchers have found waves in space, which are called gravitational waves, that seem to come from black holes smashing into each other. And not just any black holes, but ones that are 100 to 300 times heavier than the Sun, which may mean that they're those mysterious mid-sized black holes. Plus, those are the biggest black hole collisions we've ever recorded on Earth. Now, black holes are like space fossils, super old history clues. And those newly discovered black holes could tell us about the first stars that ever lit up the universe. The problem lies in the fact that our tools on Earth, like LIGO, which stands for Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, only catch a tiny moment of these black holes crashing together, literally just a split second. That makes it tough to figure out where those medium-sized black holes come from. So, scientists have a new plan. One scientific lab is getting ready for a future space mission called LISA, short for Laser Interferometer Space Antenna. It's a cool space project by NASA and the European Space Agency, launching in the late 2030s. LISA will float in space and be able to catch the whole story of black hole crashes, not just the final boom. It will track black holes years before they crash into each other. And, if all goes well, we might finally figure out where these mysterious black holes come from and learn even more about how our universe began. So you might be wondering about how LISA will do it. Remember we talked about ripples dashing through space called gravitational waves? Black holes crashing into each other could send them out. Well, LISA is being built to listen for such waves. It'll float in space and look for all kinds of cosmic shakeups, not just huge ones, but also smaller black holes spinning around giant ones. Now, why do gravitational waves matter? A lot of space stuff is too dark to see with regular telescopes, since no light comes from it at all. But gravitational waves don't care about light. They go through everything, telling us about the secrets hiding in the dark parts of the universe. By studying them, scientists hope to learn about things we've never seen before, like black holes, or what really happened at the very start of the universe, and maybe even things we don't know exist yet. LISA will help us figure out how the universe began, how it's changing, and what it's made of. Now, getting back to those black hole collisions, finding them isn't easy. But researchers have come up with a smart solution. They're using artificial intelligence to make sure the signals from space aren't messed up by noise from Earth or the machines themselves. This work was part of a project focused on combining AI with space science. Scientists are getting more confident that intermediate mass black holes, the ones in between small and supermassive, are real, and they might be some of the most exciting things we can study using gravitational waves, both from Earth and from space. So the next big step? Looking to the Moon. Future detectors placed on the lunar surface could be even better at catching certain types of space waves, especially ones that Earth-based machines might miss. That would help scientists figure out where those black holes dwell in space. Besides this research, scientists are also planning human exploration of the Moon. They're helping NASA choose the best spots for future missions, focusing on big science goals like solar physics, space weather, and how the universe works. Right now is a super exciting time, not just for studying black holes, but also for connecting space exploration and science.
Titanic.
The Titanic.
The Titanic.
The Titanic.
Titanic.
The Titanic.
The Titanic.
Titanic.
The Titanic.
Congratulations! You can now forget everything you've seen in the movies or everything you've read in books and newspapers and heard from people. Now we have the most detailed and reliable study of the famous sunken ship. A large-scale Titanic 3D scan allows us to see in fine detail everything that happened during the disaster. And rest assured, there was a lot going on there that you've never heard of. Are you ready for Titanic new discoveries? Let's go! There's a fat chance, or a thin chance, take your pick, that there are no people here who haven't heard of what happened. But just in case, here's the quick backstory. On April 10, 1912, the giant cruise ship Titanic sailed from Southampton, England to New York City. 4 days later, the ship collided with an iceberg and sank in the freezing waters of the North Atlantic. It was one of the most tragic and biggest disasters in the history of sea voyages. Since then, the wreck of the giant ship has been lying under a layer of icy water. For decades, people wanted to get this ship from the bottom many times, but they never fully tried. Passenger stories, documentaries, and books have given us a complete picture of what happened. But the only witness that can tell us about those tragic events is the ship itself. And some people decided to ask it about that night. A group of experts, oceanographers and cinematographers, recreated a virtual version of the events and showed it in the documentary Titanic: The Digital Resurrection. This is the most detailed digital reconstruction of how the Titanic sank ever made. To create it, specialists from the Magellan Company sent marine robots to the bottom where the ship lies at a depth of 12,500 feet. In such a place, all objects experience immense water pressure. To better understand how great it is, imagine the weight of a heavy barbell on your fingertip. Experienced divers with standard scuba gear can only swim at depths up to 130 feet and a little deeper. So it's a challenging, almost impossible mission to descend to such a depth and conduct research. It's dangerous for people. That's why the team of specialists sent robots there. Equipped with cameras for deep-sea surveys, they took more than 700,000 photos and videos in 4K resolution. They were collecting data for 3 weeks, exploring every part of the ship. Eventually, they had about 16 terabytes of data. Now, 1 terabyte is 1,000 gigabytes. Is that a lot? The largest game on PC, Microsoft Flight Simulator, weighs about ½ terabyte, and it has maps of the entire planet to create a realistic flight simulator. Still, this huge program weighs 32 times less than that Titanic scan. Imagine how detailed the model of the ship and the simulation of the disaster turned out to be. Moreover, the team combined all this information with the drawings of the ship. They calculated the speed of Titanic that night, its direction, its position, and the angle of impact with the iceberg. All of this was uploaded to supercomputers to create precise crash simulations. After that, specialists studied eyewitness reports, got consultations from historians and maritime experts, and then presented a detailed staging of the tragic night. Some things turned out to be different from what you know about them. For example, the iceberg didn't make a huge hole in the side of the ship. A Titanic wreckage scan shows that a piece of ice had struck a glancing blow and created several holes in the hull. Each of them was the size of an A4 sheet of paper. How could such minor damage destroy a giant ship? The problem was that those A4-sized punctures covered the entire length of the case. The Titanic's creators claimed that it was the most unsinkable ship in the world. However, its unsinkability lay in the fact that it could stay afloat even if 4 of its watertight compartments got flooded. But the collision with the iceberg led to the flooding of 6 of them. The iceberg had a mere 6.3 seconds of contact with the ship and still managed to sink it. The Titanic wreckage scan also showed a portal with a broken window. The iceberg probably crashed in there. This finding confirms the words of eyewitnesses that pieces of ice got into the cabins. Just imagine how frightening that was. You're sleeping peacefully in your bed, then you hear a loud crash, and a piece of iceberg falls into your cabin. And after that, absolute chaos begins. The researchers found out exactly how the ship had split in half. In the famous movie, we all saw how the back of the ship had risen above the water and then broken off. The ship indeed broke, but not as gently as we saw on the screen. Yeah, the scale of the disaster was terrible, but the reality was even worse. The ship wasn't just broken, it was torn in two. Wooden and metal parts of the ship, pipes, chunks of the hull, walls, everything was torn and bent. The first-class cabins were torn in two. Imagine the screeching of metal that sounded on that cold night. Researchers compared other Titanic facts versus the movie. One of them was a story about First Officer William Murdoch. In the movie, his character attacked passengers who were trying to board the boat. But in reality, everything happened differently. Titanic survivor Charles Lightoller said William Murdoch had drowned when he was trying to lower a lifeboat into the water. He didn't attack anybody, but still faced a tragic fate. There are no exact details, but high-resolution scans have confirmed this version. But one of the most impressive and heroic tales that happened on the Titanic occurred in the boiler room. With the help of robots, experts discovered that one of the boat's steam valves had been left open. This finding only confirms eyewitness stories that the engineers stayed in the boiler room for more than 2 hours after the collision with the icebergs. This group of brave people maintained a power supply until the very end. Why did they do it? Proper lighting on the Titanic helped people safely lower the boats onto the water. Electric power also made the Titanic visible to distant ships. Moreover, passengers reported that the Titanic's lights were on even when it was submerged underwater. The brave feat of the engineers helped save hundreds of passengers' lives. Who knows, perhaps further research of the ship will tell us more about other heroic actions of the passengers and crew members. Actions that will be worth making a movie about. In addition to studying the ship, The researchers also scanned the seabed around the wreckage, where not only parts of the Titanic, but also personal belongings of passengers, including gold coins, pocket watches, combs, shoes, and so on, were scattered. By the way, many of those items have been raised from the bottom and sold at various auctions. You can also see some artifacts from the ship in specialized museums. One of those is called Titanic Belfast and is located in Northern Ireland. It is open to the public. A digital replica of the ship not only shows us how the Titanic sank, but also literally saves the ship. The condition of the wreckage is getting worse every day. Gigantic pressure, cold temperature, water, and marine life – all of this is slowly destroying the vessel. Oh yeah, some companies that organize dive trips to the ship for tourists also pose a danger to the ship. It turns out that there are a lot of people who wanted to go down inside a submersible to the legendary wreck. As a result of some of these excursions, parts of the ship were damaged. Experts predict that within the next 40 years, the unlucky liner may disappear completely. Fortunately, the Titanic 3D scan has provided such a level of detail that you can imagine walking inside it. This means that the tragedy will never be forgotten. Of course, 10 videos like this one won't be enough to cover the full scope of the work that the filmmakers have done. Fortunately, the documentary, Titanic – The Digital Resurrection, is available for viewing. You can watch the movie and also study the 3D models of the ship. Who knows? Perhaps you can make new discoveries.
Welcome to one of the most mysterious and unexplored places on Earth. But what's so special about that? It's just some icy peaks and the endless snowy expanse of Antarctica. Yeah, that's right. But there's still a planetary scale mystery here. No matter how hard you try, you won't see a hidden mountain range, giant, unexplored land where no human has ever set foot, and it lies under another layer of mountains. It's like a nesting doll, but the size of a continent. These mountains hide Antarctica secrets, and these secrets can tell us something awesome about the ancient history of our planet. This gigantic unexplored territory in Antarctica is called the Gambritsev Subglacial Mountains. And the layer of ice above keeps this place untouched by nature and people. It's like a land inside another land, and it hides more than just mountains. There are valleys, hills, and plains. The whole area is similar to the European Alps, but unfortunately, we can't enjoy the view. Those mountains were first discovered in 1958 using seismological instruments. More than half a century has passed since then, and this place still remains one of the most poorly studied tectonic objects on Earth. Why? Because it's ice. A lot of ice. Who knows? Maybe there are some unknown ancient artifacts lying there. What if they're hiding a secret city or spaceships? It's unlikely, of course, but it would still be interesting to look there. Think about it. Hundreds or even thousands of miles of land that have remained unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. Even if no new species of animals or remains of an ancient civilization are there, this place still has a history. The history of the formation of continents on our planet. And scientists have already figured out some of this story. The mountains buried in Antarctica were originally like ordinary mountains, but as a result of a planetary scale event, they just… Wait a minute. Have you ever wondered how mountain ranges are formed? We see them in real life, in movies, in photos on the internet. We climb them. But how did they appear? Mountains have not always existed on the planet in this form. They appeared as a result of a large-scale collision of tectonic plates. Two giant solid chunks of ground are moving toward each other, then crash, and boom! Millions of tons of the Earth's crust pile on top of each other, mix, and form ledges and gorges. And all this can last for millions of years. Yes, it's a disaster, but it's very slow. Some tectonic plates are still colliding. For example, the Himalayas continue to grow because the Indian and Eurasian plates are still ramming into each other. And this process began about 50 million years ago. The Gambritsev Mountains under ice experienced a similar event, only much earlier. An article in the journal Earth and Planetary Science Letters says that they appeared during the formation of the supercontinent Gondwana. Two giant pieces of land were separated by a boundless ocean. But then, about 700 million years ago, they collided and formed Gondwana. This supercontinent included the territories of modern Africa, South America, Australia, India, and Antarctica. The giant pieces crashed into each other and released a stream of hot, partially molten rock. This mess grew bigger and bigger, forming mountains. The temperature of those mountains grew, their mass increased, and at some point, Gondwana became unstable. The supercontinent began to collapse under its own weight. The hot rocks below the surface began to flow sideways as a result of a process called gravitational spreading. Take toothpaste and start squeezing it out of the tube. Approximately the same thing happened with billions of tons of red-hot rock. Ancient mountains in Antarctica appeared right during this catastrophic event. You've just watched a visual simulation of global events that took place hundreds of millions of years ago. It looks cool, but how did scientists figure it out? How did they see this planetary-scale destruction? If the Gambritsev Mountains under ice is one of the most unexplored places in the world, then how could people find out its origin? The answer is simple. Tiny particles of rock have told us about the changing landscape of the planet. These are zircons, but scientists also call them time capsules. This mineral is very handy and resistant to mechanical and chemical influences. It's difficult to crush, it doesn't get affected by erosion, and it doesn't dissolve in water. And there's uranium inside it. This chemical element shows scientists the age of the rock. The fact is that uranium always decays into lead at the same rate. Scientists look at the ratio of uranium and lead and determine the age of minerals with great accuracy. Okay, this sounds a bit complicated. Here's a simple example. Imagine that each mountain belt is a clock that starts ticking at the moment of its formation. That is, after the collision of tectonic plates. After the rock forms, uranium begins its slow decay. The more time passes, the more uranium turns into lead. The rate of this decay is always the same. This decay can last for billions of years. The less uranium is in zircons and the more lead, the older the rock is. And this is how it happens in practice. Geologists take several rock samples. In a lab, they crush it to extract crystalline zircons. Geologists then dissolve the particles in acid to separate uranium from lead. Then they use a special device, a mass spectrometer that accelerates atoms and sorts them by mass. This is a rather complicated process, but the bottom line is that this device shows scientists the amount of uranium and lead. They look at the ratios of these two elements and calculate the age of the rock. Geologists took zircons from sandstones near the Gambritsev Mountains, studied those particles, looked at the level of uranium, and calculated the chronology of mountain formation. Then they compared the data obtained with the history of our planet and realized that the mountains buried in Antarctica appeared during the formation of the supercontinent Gondwana. But how did they find out that the supercontinent included Australia, India, and Africa? Zirconia from those Antarctic rocks turned out to be very similar to zirconium from those countries. That is, a long time ago, these three continents were together. So, the Gambritsev Mountains began to grow about 650 million years ago. About 580 million years ago, they reached the height of the Himalayas, and 80 million years later, they experienced the melting of the Earth's crust. And while most of the mountain ranges on the planet were changing and collapsing, the Gambritsev Mountains under ice remained untouched. Water, soil, wind, earthquakes, gravity, and other natural forces destroy mountain belts. This process is called erosion. But mountains buried in Antarctica haven't experienced anything like this. The cold temperature and the ice sheet around them kept this range unchanged. It's one of the best preserved ancient mountain belts on the planet. Okay, but why do we need to explore these mountains? What difference does it make that the supercontinent Gondwana collapsed in the past? It's possible that plants, frozen bodies of insects, or ancient bacteria have remained preserved under thick layers of ice. What about ancient animals? Many species could have lived on Gondwana. Studying ancient mountains in Antarctica can show us what the planet looked like about 500 million years ago. When Antarctica was a green continent, what lived on it? What happened to this life? Is it possible to revive those ancient creatures after so many years? If scientists were able to calculate the date of the supercontinent's appearance using tiny particles, then imagine what they could find after examining this hidden mountain range. It all sounds very interesting, but there's one problem. To take a small piece of this unknown world, you need to drill through a lot of ice. You need to deliver heavy equipment to one of the most inaccessible continents in the world, build stations, obtain an energy source, and conduct large-scale research. It sounds incredibly expensive, so this hidden territory will probably remain a mystery for a long time. Let's just hope that some billionaire will want to find out Antarctica's secrets and arrange a large-scale expedition there.
Get ready, because one of the Pacific Ocean's most active volcanoes might blow any minute now. Scientists monitoring Axial Seamount, a gigantic underwater lava factory just off the coast of Oregon, say it could erupt literally any time between today and early 2026 at the latest. Yes, it's underwater, but don't get tricked by the ocean's cover. This beast is almost 3 times taller than the Empire State Building. This volcano is inflating like a souffle at a Michelin-starred restaurant, and scientists are so excited they will live stream it. Seriously! So here's the thing. This volcano will explode at any moment now because, well, it's inflating fast. Over the past few months, researchers have noticed that the seafloor is literally rising. It's like Axial is doing its best impression of a waterbed filled with molten rock. Scientists call this inflation, which sounds like something you'd complain about after Thanksgiving dinner. But in volcano terms, it means magma is piling up underground, causing the seafloor to bulge like a souffle that's this close to collapsing. Now, an underwater volcanic eruption might not sound so exotic. After all, most volcanic activity on Earth happens under the sea. Believe it or not, there are more than 1 million submarine volcanoes quietly churning lava beneath the waves as you watch this. The ocean floor is Earth's biggest volcanic hotspot. What makes Axial Seamount so thrilling is that it's under intense scientific surveillance, unlike any other underwater volcano. It's like the star player in a volcanic reality show, with a network of ocean-bottom instruments giving researchers real-time updates on magma movements, seismic tremors, and crust deformation. In fact, Axial Seamount hosts the world's first-ever underwater volcanic laboratory. Scientists have been keeping a constant eye on it since the 1990s, when they installed sensors that now relay live data straight from the seafloor. This kind of monitoring is unheard of elsewhere and has turned Axial into a geological celebrity, one whose behavior we can track with remarkable precision. Besides, Axial is hilariously predictable. It erupts roughly every decade, and right on cue, it's gearing up for another performance. By mid-2024, it had inflated to nearly the same level as before its last eruption, which means the countdown is on. Scientists are so confident in its schedule that they've set up a volcanic advent calendar, waiting for the day when Axial decides to pop. But hold on, Axial Seamount isn't just your average underwater volcano. It's got style, personality, and a geological identity of its own. Now, most underwater volcanoes, called seamounts, tend to look like cones or flattened domes. Axial laughs in the face of tradition with its unfashionably rectangular caldera, a 2-by-5-mile crater that looks like it was designed by a geologist with a ruler and a grudge against curves. Most volcanoes opt for the classic circular look, but Axial, it went full avant-garde. This caldera is punctuated by fissures, vents, lava channels, and mysterious dome-like structures that rise hundreds of feet high. It's like the volcano's wearing a funky geometrical crown instead of the usual rounded hat. What's more, Axial's location is like prime real estate for geological fireworks. It sits right where two major forces collide, literally. First, it's on the Juan de Fuca Ridge, an underwater mountain range formed where two tectonic plates are slowly pulling apart, like a zipper being undone. Second, it's perched atop the Cobb Hotspot, a deep mantle plume that acts like Earth's sneaky magma espresso machine, pumping molten rock from deep inside the planet and fueling a whole chain of seamounts. To put it plainly, it's like the tectonic plates are reluctant dance partners, sliding away from each other, while the Cobb Hotspot acts as the DJ, turning up the heat and keeping the magma party going. This dual influence creates a complex plumbing system inside the volcano, with magma chambers filling, draining, and shifting in ways scientists are still trying to decode. The competition between the spreading plates and upwelling magma is what gives Axial its unique geological fingerprint, and it's also why this volcano keeps surprising us. Now, we said that Axial Summit isn't just a crater. The truth is that inside, the action gets even weirder and cooler. Well, hotter, but you get it. Axial hosts black smoker hydrothermal vents, which blast superheated water at temperatures exceeding 700 degrees Fahrenheit. This is no ordinary underwater hot tub. These vents create one of Earth's most extreme environments, where bizarre creatures thrive in total darkness and scalding heat. Giant tube worms, crabs, colonies of bacteria, and even octopuses live off the mineral-rich plumes that gush from these vents, forming ecosystems completely independent from sunlight and photosynthesis. It's like an alien world beneath the waves, thriving off the volcano's fiery breath. These vent communities are crucial to science, not just because they're strange, but because they may resemble the earliest ecosystems on Earth. Some researchers believe life on our planet may have originated in similar deep-sea hydrothermal environments billions of years ago. Studying them could also help us search for life on icy moons, like Europa and Enceladus, where similar vents might exist beneath their frozen surfaces. When Axial erupts, it's like a natural reset button for these communities. The lava wipes everything out, but within months, life comes roaring back. Proof that even in the most hostile environments, real estate is always in demand. For those worrying about tsunamis or coastal disasters, relax. Axial's eruptions are the underwater equivalent of a slow cooker. The immense water pressure keeps things chill, well, scalding, but not explosive. So the worst thing that happens is some lava decorates the seafloor, and a few crabs have to find new vents to squat in. This means no massive ash clouds or explosive blasts that could reach the surface. Instead, lava oozes out and spreads across the seafloor, sometimes traveling for miles. But for scientists, this eruption is the golden ticket. Understanding Axial's patterns could help predict eruptions elsewhere, even on land. Plus, its bizarre ecosystems offer clues about how life might survive on other planets. Not bad for a volcano that mostly just sits around looking rectangular. Still, the volcano's activity can be heard in the form of thousands of small earthquakes every day. Thousands! As if the volcano itself was groaning and creaking, preparing to burst open. Again, we won't feel a thing, but at least they'll help scientists track the magma's movements and the volcano's eruptive cycle. Now, one of the coolest parts of this story is that scientists are preparing to live-stream Axial's next eruption for the first time ever. Imagine watching an undersea volcano in action, live, as it's painting the ocean floor with fresh lava. It's like a front row seat to a natural fireworks display, thousands of feet beneath the waves. The livestream will come courtesy of the Ocean Observatory's initiative, which maintains a series of fiber optic cables linking Axial's instruments directly to shore. It's the Wi-Fi of the deep sea, and it's about to broadcast molten rock in HD. And there's another twist. Scientists have noticed a curious pattern in Axial's eruptions. All three of its most recent eruptions, in 1998, 2011, and 2015, happened between January and April, the months when Earth starts moving away from the Sun. So why? Well, it might have something to do with the Moon's gravitational pull. The Moon's orbit causes ocean tides to rise and fall, which changes the pressure on the seafloor and could help nudge the magma chamber to its breaking point. I guess the moon isn't just a romantic light in the night sky. It might be the ultimate volcanic whisperer. So, one thing's for sure, when Axial goes, it'll be the best documented underwater eruption in history. So, keep your eyes peeled. This is one natural spectacle you won't want to miss. And who knows, if we're lucky, we might even get deep-sea eruption ASMR out of the deal. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll be refreshing the live feed like it's a Taylor Swift ticket sale. Well, here you are, on a week-long trek through the Himalayas. You're exhausted, the cold is cutting through to your bones, and suddenly, you stumble upon a human skeleton near a lake. You look around, and there are dozens, maybe even hundreds of bones scattered across the ground. Well, guess what? This really happened in 1942 with an Indian forest official. Since this chilling discovery, researchers have been trying to figure out how so many people lost their lives in such a remote, isolated spot. So, what happened up there? We're talking about Rupkund, a lake sitting at over 16,000 feet in the Himalayas. But it's not just known by that name. People also call it Mystery Lake, or even more bizarrely, the Skeleton Lake. This place is remote, I mean really remote. It's not just because it's insanely high up, but also because it's surrounded by snow-covered mountains. Now, if you're planning to go there, make sure you have some solid hiking shoes. It's a week-long trek covering more than 30 miles of tough, rugged terrain. Along the way, you'll pass through all kinds of challenging landscapes: moss-covered oak forests, misty fields with an eerie vibe, and up at the top, snow. The highest point of the trek is a knife-edge ridge called Junargali. Just below that lies Rupkund. The closer you get to the lake, the darker the atmosphere feels. And on the ground, you can find human skeletons scattered around, belonging to more than 300 people. Along with them, there were things like wooden artifacts, leather slippers, and rings. Okay, so something really macabre happened here. But what? Well, we have three main theories. Theory number 1, the local legend. According to this story, a long time ago, a king named Raja Justival went on a pilgrimage deep into the Himalayas to reach a sacred mountain temple. He brought his pregnant queen, Rani Balumpa, along with a group of servants, dancers, and others. While they were up in the mountains, a massive hailstorm hit, or as the legend goes, an angry deity started hurling iron balls from the sky. Either way, the storm was brutal, and they had nowhere to take shelter. In the end, they all lost their lives near the lake. Theory number 2, an escape route. Some say the remains belong to Indian soldiers who tried to invade a foreign territory back in 1841, but they were defeated. Over 70 of them were forced to make their way back home through the Himalayas, and they met a tragic end along the way. Theory number 3, a mass grave. This theory suggests that some kind of widespread health issue hit the group. They were all buried there, in isolation, to prevent the disease from spreading. In this case, Rupkund Lake and its surroundings would basically be a cold, remote cemetery. Now, do you know what all these theories have in common? They all assume that the skeletons belong to a single group of people who died in one catastrophic event. But then science came along and things got way creepier. In 2019, 28 scientists from institutions in the US, India, and Germany teamed up for 5 years to figure out what the heck happened up there. They studied the remains of 38 individuals, 23 men and 15 women. And right there, we can already toss out theory number 2. That's important because if these people had been soldiers on a military mission, you would expect most, if not all of them, to be men. Armies in the past were almost entirely male. But here, there were just too many women for that to make sense. And on top of that, no signs of combat or military gear were found at all. After a genetic analysis, researchers noticed that the individuals weren't part of the same family, at least not by blood, like third-degree relatives or closer. And most importantly, they were mostly healthy. These two facts help rule out theory number 3. It probably wasn't some kind of highly contagious health problem. But the most shocking part is that these skeletons didn't belong to just one single group. They actually came from 3 distinct groups. The first group had ancestry that falls within the range of present-day South Asians, basically from the regions that are now India, Pakistan, and Nepal. The second group had ancestry typical of Eastern Mediterranean, just like people from today's Greece, or more specifically from Crete. And they also identified one individual with Southeast Asian-related ancestry. The dating also shows that these remains weren't deposited at the same time. In other words, groups 1 and 2 didn't live during the same period. Their deaths were actually spread out over as much as 1,000 years. Oh great, now theory number 1 is out the window too. After all, the studies can confirm that these people passed away in at least 2 separate tragic events. According to the researchers, there is a possible clue about where at least some of the people with South Asian ancestry might have come from, or why they were even up there in the first place. Rapkund Lake isn't part of any major trade route or anything like that, but it is along the path of a pilgrimage called the Nanda Devi Raj Jat. It still happens today, once every 12 years, where people hike through the mountains for worship and celebration. Now, the written records of this pilgrimage only show up around the late 1800s, but there are inscriptions in nearby temples that go way back, like to the 8th or 10th century. So, it's possible the tradition started much earlier, and maybe some of these people passed away during one of those early pilgrimages, due to a heavy storm or some other natural disaster. Okay, but how do we explain the group that came from Greece? Well, that's definitely more puzzling. First, because there aren't any historical records or evidence to explain who these people were or what they were doing in the far reaches of the Himalayas, so it's hard to know where to start. The study suggests that they could have been a group of unrelated men and women born in the Eastern Mediterranean region around the time the Ottoman Empire controlled that area. The evidence suggests that they had a diet mostly based on land-based foods, not the seafood you would expect from people living near the coast. So they might have lived inland and somehow ended up in the Himalayas, possibly traveling for reasons that researchers can't fully explain yet. The best guess is that they were also participating in a pilgrimage, but honestly, it seems pretty unlikely that people from Europe would have traveled all the way to Rupkund just to do that. And let's assume they did. What exactly happened to them? I mean, how did they all pass away in the same exact spot? Well, the researchers can't say for sure, but people online love to speculate. You think? Some suggest that they fell from the Junagarli Ridge, or since they were at such a high altitude, maybe they passed away due to acute mountain sickness. Up there, the oxygen levels are much lower, which can lead to things like headaches, vomiting, and dizziness. The problem is, it can escalate quickly, and if it affects your lungs and brain, it can become life-threatening. So yeah, it could have happened. But it's still strange to think it happened to so many people all at once. We definitely still need a lot more answers when it comes to Rupkund. But one of the obstacles researchers face is that the site remains highly disturbed and unpreserved. Over the years, trekkers have moved around the skeletons, or worse, some have even taken them home as macabre souvenirs. But the more we mess with those remains, the harder it becomes to find an accurate answer in the future, no matter how much science advances. So, for now, the Mystery Lake will remain exactly that, a big mystery. Hey there! Yeah, you, my friend, on the other side of this screen. You're listening to my voice and watching this video, which was created in certain computer programs and is streaming on the device of your choice. So, perhaps there's not much difference between you and me, because there's a chance that you're also created inside a special app. You don't believe that? Well, let's try to figure out this crazy theory. So, meet Dr. Melvin Vopson. He explores the idea that our universe is a computer simulation. Yes, you've probably heard it before. Elon Musk has made similar statements, but what exactly do these people mean? Melvin Vopson believes that gravity is a life hack that the universe uses to reduce the load on its computing processor. It's like programs for compressing files on your computer, only on a gigantic scale. Now, what is gravity? In simple words, it's the force of attraction between any objects having mass. Our planet is round and doesn't break up into billions of pieces because of gravity. We walk on the ground and don't fly off into the sky because of gravity. The phone is lying on your desk thanks to, say it with me, gravity. The moon orbits the Earth following the same trajectory. The planets of the solar system travel in the same orbits around the sun. Almost the entire universe strictly adheres to the laws of physics, and one of the greatest of these laws is gravity. I don't say the whole universe, because there are unknown things, such as dark matter and the like, that we don't know anything about. So gravity helps to keep order. But then, what does a computer program have to do with it? There are tons of different objects in the universe. Let's say our planet consists of the core, rocks, dust, air, various gases, trees, and a billion other things. Without gravity, all these things would fly away in different directions. Each of them has its own speed, size, and density. All this is a huge amount of information. But the force of gravity unites them into one object, the planet. And when all these billions of things are together, it's easier for the universal computer to process and read information. How about another example? Snowflakes have a remarkably similar shape. The waveform is nearly the same. The appearance of galaxies in distant space seems to be drawn according to a single pattern. And there are a lot of such symmetries in nature. And almost all of them are symmetrical thanks to gravity. What if this similarity is just another example of data optimization? Imagine if snowflakes looked different. It would be difficult for the computer to process each shape. But gravity forces all this matter to reduce the load on the processor. Gravity organizes and structures the universe, just like the archiver program on your computer. But why is this necessary? Well, in the case of the computer, data compression helps save space and improve the work of the processor. In our universe, everything seems to be working stably. It remains organized. Dr. Vopson suggests that all the elementary particles in our universe, such as atoms, electrons, photons, and the like, are tiny building blocks that contain information. It's like the cells inside our body that contain DNA. The scientist also draws an analogy with computer data. Any picture, video, game, or anything else on our screens consists of tiny bits of information in the form of binary data, ones and zeros. Our universe can work in the same way. If there's no information in a cell, it is zero. If there is matter inside, it's a unit. This is the principle used to develop computer games, VR apps, and complex simulations. But unlike computer programs, a cell in our universe can hold more than one particle. Thanks to this ability, particles can get together inside this cell. In terms of performance and energy savings, it's much easier to calculate the location and momentum of a single large object in space than many smaller disconnected objects. Gravity supports this optimization process. Well, of course, all this is just speculation, and scientists don't have any unmistakable evidence to support this theory. But there's one more thing that may indicate that we live in a simulation. You've probably heard of the observer effect in physics. When you observe the tiniest particles, like photons, they behave in a certain way. But when no one is watching them, they behave differently. This is how pixels behave in a video game. Imagine that you're riding a motorcycle while playing a game. There's a forest ahead of you. You see well-drawn trees that look like real ones, but then you stop and quickly turn in the opposite direction. If your computer is not enormously powerful, you may notice that the textures are loaded with a delay of a fraction of a second. If you're looking at a city, at first it's just the outline, and then you start seeing houses and lights. This happens because when we're not looking at the city, the computer doesn't load its textures to reduce the load on the processor. What's the point of wasting gigabytes of data if the player doesn't interact with the city in any way? But when you do look at the city, the processor shows it in all its beauty. And while you can see the streets and buildings, the forest disappears behind you until you look at it. The smallest particles of our universe act similarly. They stay unloaded till you watch them. The theory is entertaining, but there's one nuance. Photons and other tiny particles behave differently when you're not observing them. Not because the universe saves data, but because the observer influences the behavior of particles. That is, while observing them, you use your eyes or lenses or some kind of device and detector. The very fact of observation changes matter, which is why photons behave this way. So, we don't know yet whether our universe is modeled or not. But what is the difference between a simulated computer program and the real world? Maybe the reality of the world is meant to be modeled inside a super powerful program. And if we are part of this world, then we are also like programs? In this case, the world is very real to us. It's perfect for us. Now imagine you take a computer character from a video game and place them in our reality. They simply can't exist in our world. They are much more comfortable living where you got them from. The world of the video game for them means the same as our world means for us. So, if there's a reality beyond our universe, then think twice. Would you like to get there? The human brain is unlikely to be able to perceive another reality, and if it tries, where is the guarantee that it won't go crazy? So, it's better to enjoy our universe. And don't forget that there's a whole universe inside each of us. No, seriously, where are the limits to your imagination? You can imagine absolutely anything in your head. A giant ship with long spider legs moving through a desert or rain where tiny Eiffel Towers fall to the ground instead of raindrops. There are trillions of possibilities in your imagination. But besides that, there are also feelings and emotions, joy, irritation, love. Yeah, you can say that our feelings are the result of chemical reactions in the brain. But don't you think there might be something more behind it? For example, you see a homeless guy. You give him some money and food. You show you care, thanks to the neurons responsible for empathy and feelings of mercy. But what if you're going home after a dreadful day at work and see that homeless person again? You're irritated, tired, and the neurons responsible for empathy are disabled. But even so, you can still show care for this homeless guy and give him food. That is, you do it regardless of the chemical processes in your brain. And this is just one example out of millions. Is a computer program capable of such a thing? If we live in a simulation, and if we're programs, then we are incredibly complex, advanced, and beautiful programs. And how do such perfect programs differ from what we call real in our heads? Although the word programs is not appropriate here, we are creations. Then, who is the creator? Or is there such a thing? Well, hate to stop here after asking the big metaphysical question, but hey, I gots to go.
It's a perfect summer day. You're relaxing on the beach, dipping your toes into the cool water, when suddenly, BAM! A 56-foot aquatic nightmare rockets from the waves. It's the size of 2 London double-decker buses, sporting about 60 razor-sharp teeth, including bonus chompers on the roof of its mouth, because why not? This aquatic beast isn't picky about its diet either. Sharks? Turtles? Other sea monsters? Yep, they're all on the menu. Meet the mosasaur, a group of marine reptiles that ruled the oceans millions of years ago. If you've seen Jurassic World, you'll recognize them as the stars of that epic moment when a massive creature leaps out of the water to snatch a great white shark like it's sushi. That's a mosasaurus, and it's every bit as terrifying as it sounds. Recently, scientists stumbled upon a fossil of one of those marine monsters in, of all places, Mississippi. Yes, Mississippi, the land of magnolias and catfish. Turns out it's also home to ancient sea dragons. This discovery was a happy accident. A team of geologists was mapping the terrain in east-central Mississippi when they noticed something strange poking out of the ground. It wasn't a rock or seashell. It was a vertebra. And a massive one. In fact, it was so large it barely fit in the hand of the scientist who found it. The fossil likely belonged to the largest known species of mosasaur, the Mosasaurus hoffmanni. Now, the biggest mosasaur ever found clocked in at a staggering 56 feet long. This new specimen hit a solid 30 feet at least, and while it might not break the world record, it certainly makes the crown for the biggest mosasaur ever discovered in Mississippi. Fun fact, that's still longer than the average RV, and with way worse gas mileage. To be fair, the Mississippi Museum of Natural Science already had a couple of mosasaur fossils in its collection. But this newcomer might just steal the spotlight. And this isn't an isolated incident. In 2015, paleontologists unearthed the skull of a 24-foot-long mosasaur in North Dakota. Years later, a private fossil hunter, yes, that's a thing, found an equally huge mosasaur in Texas. Well, its jaw at least. These sea monsters, also known as sea dragons, by the way, actually have one of the wildest origin stories in paleontology. The very first skull was found way back in 1764 in a chalk quarry in the Netherlands. And at the time, scientists thought it was a whale. Then came a second skull, which was so impressive that French revolutionaries literally looted it during the siege in 1794. Legend has it they swapped it for 600 bottles of wine. Doesn't sound like a fair trade to me. That fossil actually helped pioneer the concept of extinction and got paleontologists buzzing for centuries. Since then, mosasaur fossils have popped up all over the world, like ancient scaly celebrities leaving their mark. From the Mississippi backwoods to the deserts of Morocco, from New Jersey to Belgium, scientists have uncovered everything from teeth to full skulls, sometimes even misplacing them in museum drawers for centuries. So what exactly were these terrifying titans of the deep? Well, let's just say, if ancient oceans had a most likely to eat everything in sight award, the mosasaur would win it. Picture a gigantic scaly torpedo with a mouth full of about 60 razor-sharp teeth, including some growing on the roof of its mouth like dental overkill. It had a long, muscular tail for propulsion and 4 paddle-like limbs that worked like turbocharged oars, letting it cruise through warm, shallow seas like a reptilian speedboat. Scientists believe they were close relatives of modern monitor lizards and snakes, which honestly just makes both of those animals way more terrifying. Some mosasaurs even might have had adaptations for sensing vibrations in the water, allowing them to detect movement from a distance, similar to how sharks use electroreception today. Their eyes were well developed too, giving them sharp vision in the dim ocean depths, a key advantage when hunting fast or elusive prey. But what really makes mosasaurs the stuff of prehistoric nightmares is their attitude. They were apex predators, and they knew it. Those sea monsters weren't picky eaters. Fish, turtles, birds, sharks, other mosasaurs. Basically anything that moved was dinner. Fossilized mosasaur stomach contents prove they practiced family dinner in the most metal way possible. If they were around today, your beach day would be a lot more exciting. Probably shorter. These guys were so intense, they dominated the whole world. It's safe to say, mosasaurs were the undisputed rulers of the late Cretaceous oceans. And like today's orcas or great white sharks, they probably used ambush tactics, sneaking up on prey from below before striking with explosive force. Bite marks found on the fossilized bones of turtles and even other mosasaurs suggest intense underwater battles worthy of a blockbuster movie. But how did one end up in Mississippi of all places? Well, rewind the clock about 80 million years and you'll find part of North America underwater. A vast shallow sea known as the Western Interior Seaway split the continent in two, running from the Gulf of Mexico to the Arctic Ocean. It was warm, teeming with life, and yes, crawling with sea monsters. This prehistoric seaway was a watery wonderland. Imagine long-necked plesiosaurs gliding through the water, birds with teeth diving for fish, and oysters the size of car tires clinging to reef-like structures. Even giant fish like this weird guy over here called it home. This ancient inland sea stretched over 600 miles wide in some places, but it was no more than a few hundred feet deep, making it ideal territory for predators like mesosaurs to thrive. The shallow depth also meant that their prey had few places to hide, turning the seaway into a prehistoric buffet. But the Western Interior Seaway wasn't a permanent fixture. As the Rocky Mountains rose, the seaway slowly disappeared. Over millions of years, it transformed from a shallow ocean to swamps and then to dry land. Today, what was once an ocean is now the Midwest, complete with cornfields, cows, and the occasional mosasaur vertebra hiding in the dirt. Now, this wasn't exactly the end of the mosasaurs. Sadly, even these monsters couldn't outswim extinction. Those massive sea beasts met their watery grave around 66 million years ago, when Earth got an unwelcome visitor, a 10-mile-wide asteroid. When that space rock slammed into what is now Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, it unleashed destruction on a planetary scale. The impact triggered massive tsunamis, set forests ablaze, and shot so much debris into the atmosphere that sunlight was blocked out for months, maybe even years. This impact winter plunged Earth into a deep freeze. With sunlight gone, plants couldn't photosynthesize, and the food chain collapsed like a house of cards. On land, plant eaters starved, and predators like T-Rex soon followed. About 75% of all species on Earth disappeared. But don't think the oceans were a safe retreat. The seas were hit just as hard, if not worse. First came the mega tsunami that devastated marine life along coastlines. Then, the real villain arrived. You see, without sunlight, phytoplankton, those tiny microscopic plants that serve as the foundation of the marine food web, perished. With them went zooplankton, small fish and filter feeders. And when the buffet dried up, the big predators like the mosasaurs went hungry. No food, no future. With plunging temperatures and ocean acidification, even the ocean's top predators couldn't survive. Mosasaurs, along with plesiosaurs and ammonites, were wiped out in the blink of a geological eye. So ended the reign of sea monsters. The good news is that you can now swim at peace knowing that no sea dragon will ever come at you. I mean, it's a bummer that they went extinct, but let's be honest. Beach days are way more relaxing without 56-foot lizards crashing the party.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.